If Shaki didn't make a statement, even if the other party paid the bill sincerely, Mr. 3 would definitely make him incapacitated in an instant. They hid their whereabouts all the way, and even used camouflage when they arrived at the Chambord Islands, in order to avoid attracting the Navy and causing many unnecessary troubles. He is very afraid of trouble, so he will not allow this sudden appearance of a supernova to disrupt his plan. Through the other party's special dress and Shaki's attitude, he quickly determined the identity of the Reaper, sitting beside him. That's right, it is one of the 6 supernovas Shaki mentioned just now, the Scythe of Death and Evil, Hanamira. Since this friend is willing to pay for us, thank you very much. Mr. 3 adjusted his goggles, drank the last sip of wine, and slowly stood up. Almost at the same time, Hanamira could clearly feel the muscles all over her body tense in an instant. This kind of subtle change can't be concealed from Mr. 3, who is very knowledgeable and powerful. After thinking of the leader of the rookie pirates next to him, he couldn't help expressing emotion in his heart. I didn't expect that I am now such a strong person who can make others extremely nervous with just a random movement. I have to say, this feeling is really not bad. Buggy and Hancock followed closely behind, also standing up from the deck. Then Miss Shaki, let's go to Area 21 first. Okay, good luck to you. It wasn't until the 3 of Mr. 3 left the rip-off bar that Hanamira, who was sitting stiffly on the seat with her back straight, breathed a sigh of relief. It was definitely the first time in her life to have such close contact with the 4 emperors and their cadres. Shaki and the supernova in front of him seemed to know each other, and reminded him coldly, "Don't talk nonsense, or your life will be in danger." Then she smoked a cigarette slowly. "Tell me, what information do you want?" After coming out of Shaki's rip-off bar, Mr. 3 and the others boarded a sightseeing boat that could shuttle between small islands, and headed straight for number 21 where Rayleigh was. In the original plan of Mr. 3, he also wanted to stop by the very distinctive Shampoo Land and see this island full of fantasy colors of the pirate world. Unfortunately, after learning about the existence of General Green Bull from Shaki, in order to avoid complications, he still decided to find Rayleigh early, confirm the identity of the Guardian and leave. Small sightseeing boats shuttle between the interlaced and lingering thick tree roots. Looking around, apart from the lush green grassland and the sparkling seawater, there are resin bubbles that fill the field of vision. With these 3 as the main colors, town houses are matched with various means of transportation and bubble products, perfectly embellishing a dreamy picture. Hey. The bosses probably seldom come to the Shampoo Land. I don't know if you are interested. Come and experience the sightseeing spots in our number 45 area. There are many specialty stores with high quality and low price. From the number 21 where you are going, you can take a detour and arrive at it by turning a few corners. I guarantee that you will not waste any time of yours. The driver of the sightseeing boat was a middle-aged man wearing a headscarf. The 3 of Mr. 3 had just boarded the ship, and this guy was chattering here and there. Forget it, we don't have that idea for now. Mr. 3 coldly refused. It is also of good quality and low price. To put it nicely, ordinary tourists are really going to be tricked by you, so why not bleed? The driver was still thinking about continuing to sell, but Buggy, who was disguised again, gave him a stern look. Although there are a lot of decorations on this guy's face, but after putting on his face sullenly, the fierceness and violence are really not covered. After all, he was an old fritter who wandered around illegal areas to make a living. After seeing that these strange customers were not something he could provoke, the driver of the sightseeing boat cooperated very well and shut his mouth. After more than 10 minutes, the sightseeing boat docked at the port built on the roots of giant trees. The number 21 is marked on the trunk of the Alkiman mangrove not far away. Thank you for your patronage. One person is 100 berries, and the 3 of them have a total of 300 berries. The driver said with a simple and honest smile, because you are the first-time customers, it is enough to charge you 250 Baileys. If you need anything later, you can use the special phone to contact me. After all, he left his phone bug message. After giving the money, the 3 of Mr. 3 slowly stepped off the sightseeing boat and headed towards the small town in the center of the area. Watching them gradually disappearing, the simple and honest smile on the driver's face of the sightseeing boat dissipated little by little. He lowered his head and made a call quietly. Hey, it's me. The target is 3 people. Although they are disguised, one of them has a perfect body and temperament. It is estimated that they can sell for a lot of money. A man's voice came from the phone. Very well, tell me about their appearance characteristics. If this order can be completed, according to the agreement, we will give you 5.00% of the share. Hearing this, the driver's face was full of smiles. Okay, thank you, sir. In the high-consumption islands of Chambordais, mere sightseeing boat drivers don't make much money at all, so they usually have another side job. That is to select outsiders who can get a good price at the slave auction, and secretly provide them to the traffickers, who will arrest them and get a generous share. This kind of sinful behavior in the eyes of normal people has become more and more chaotic after the nearby naval headquarters moved to the New World and lost its deterrence, but it is commonplace in the Chambord Islands. Even the Navy stationed here turned a blind eye. After all, Tianlong people need slave auctions, and slave auctions are also allowed. They were wearing. To the surprise of this middle-aged man who was immersed in the dream of making a fortune, he just wanted to organize words to describe the appearance of Mr. 3 and others. A piece of dark gray candle that was left in the corner of the sightseeing boat was emitting a scarlet flame at this moment. Boom. The candle block with explosive properties exploded, and its power was not weaker than that of ordinary shells. It shattered the sturdy sightseeing boat in an instant. The bright flames burning on the broken wooden boards flickered on the sea surface, and together with the ashes of the middle-aged man, they sank to the bottom of the sea at a speed visible to the naked eye. This half-human trafficker, who is not even considered a pirate, probably will not be able to figure it out until his death. The three people he has his eyes on are all super big pirates with a bounty of more than 1.5 billion. How could he be able to deceive such a person with his sinister intentions hidden under his simple and honest smile? What's more, Mr. 3 and Buggy are the endorsements of sinister and cunning in themselves. When the movement attracted the nearby navy, the three of Mr. 3 had already disappeared without a trace. At this time, they have arrived at the small town in the center of Area 21. After wandering around the town, the three of Mr. 3 finally came to the casino location provided by Shiki. During this period, the traffickers who pretended to be guides were also dealt with. In this illegal area, even if there is no notification from the driver of the sightseeing boat, it will be a matter of time before they are targeted by traffickers. After all, Hancock is as beautiful as a fairy, even if he has many decorations on his body. How can this simple means of camouflage be fooled by sharp-eyed traffickers? As a result, Hancock, who hated human traffickers extremely, kicked all these scumbags into a pile of scum. What's even more ironic is that shortly after the traffickers' den was destroyed, the Navy who received the news sent people to the scene to investigate. And if it's something like, partners suddenly disappear, relatives and friends are abducted, or even being taken away in person, their work efficiency will become surprisingly low. Maybe they don't want to condone the arrogant and evil behavior of human traffickers in their hearts, but in terms of behavior, they must definitely turn a blind eye to it. The reason is very simple, as the same sentence, this kind of crime is acquiesced by the noble Tianlong people. Without these traffickers, where would they collect those interesting slaves? People from non-member countries are not worthy of the rights that normal people should have, and are regarded as lower species, let alone some sea travelers whose identities are difficult to ascertain. Because most of the navies stationed in the Chambord Islands are now focusing on the operation to encircle and suppress the supernova, there is no spare manpower. Therefore, although the investigators who came here to investigate have basically confirmed the appearance, characteristics and approximate whereabouts of the three assailants, they did not launch an arrest operation. The guy who can take away a den of human traffickers is more or less capable. There is no need to make too much noise at the critical moment of encircling and suppressing the big fish like supernova. And such a decision successfully allowed them to avoid a super fish whose level was much higher than that of a supernova, the Four Emperors. The size of Casino number 21 is not very large. Entering the door is a reception room of about 10 square meters, which contains drinks and a few stools for rest and waiting. If you want to pass through the reception room and enter the casino in the inner room, you need to exchange Bailey for the corresponding chips at the bar in advance. The staff responsible for the exchange of chips is a beautiful woman dressed as a black bunny girl. Her alluring face and extreme curves made her stand out among the bodyguards of the men in black. "Hello. What do you need?" The beauty at the reception had her signature smile on her lips and her voice was sweet. Mr. 3 had no intention of exchanging chips and entering the casino, so he took out a few Baileys and put them in front of the beauties, and asked aloud. "This beautiful sister, it's like this. I want to ask, have you ever seen a thin old man with free and easy white hair and glasses? Compared with spending a lot of Baileys in exchange for useless chips, it is obviously more efficient to spend a little money to save time and effort to solve the problem." The beauty at the reception looked up at Mr. 3 wearing black sunglasses, her charming eyes were full of doubts. "I always feel that this man looks familiar." "No," she walked quietly to Bailey on the table and replied coldly. Hearing this, Mr. 3 took out a few more Baileys and handed them over. An hour ago, that old gambler who lost all his chips mortgaged himself to auction house number 1, and it is estimated that he will be auctioned off soon. The beauty at the reception put away Bailey, and the indifference on her face eased a little. Knew it. Mr. 3, who knew Raleigh's style, and Hancock sighed inwardly at the same time. Buggy, who didn't know it, was so shocked that the style of the painting suddenly changed, and he exclaimed, "What? That man is going to be auctioned. This kind of thing that is almost a fantasy, no matter who hears it, it will be unbelievable. Why is the auction house so bullish that even Roger's right-hand man, Pluto Rayleigh, dares to auction it? Sir, please don't make too much noise, or we will use necessary means to invite you out." The beauty at reception frowned slightly and reminded in a cold voice. "What do you mean by that?" Buggy's face quickly turned cold. He himself is a cruel and sinister person, but in the face of a powerful enemy, he will inevitably show up. But what is this small casino in front of him that dares to threaten him? Seeing this, the beautiful receptionist silently raised her palm. Behind him, several burly bodyguards in black stepped forward. Buggy's thumb hidden in the shoe was lightly buckled up, ready to send a special buggy bomb to the guys in front of him who didn't know what to do. At this moment, there was a sudden commotion in the casino inside. "You can't do this. Obviously I won. Obviously I won. I didn't cheat." After the man roared loudly, there was a violent movement of turning tables and cabinets inside. Boom. An obese man flew out from the inside, smashed the baffle inside, and fell right at Mr. 3's feet, spitting blood from his mouth and passed out. "I said you cheated and you cheated. How can there be any reason in this world to win 5 games in a row?" The thin young man walked out slowly, his wretched face was full of arrogance and arrogance. Behind him were several strong men with fierce faces. But that's not the point. The point is that the young man has a flowing and sexy hairstyle on his head. Look carefully, this person's appearance actually has a bit of Mr. 3's shadow. The young man with the letter 3 hairstyle walked up to the fat man and spat with disdain. "Hey, you bastard, do you know who I am? I am the second in command of the new 4 Emperor's Cross Guild, the illegitimate son of Mr. 3, the Candle Demon Army Master with a bounty of 3 million, Gar Ruji. PFF ha ha ha." After saying these words, Buggy, who was still raging with murderous intent a second ago, couldn't hold back at that time. The corners of his mouth twitched wildly, and he burst into a sharp and piercing laugh while covering his stomach. "Even the hairstyle is so similar. You are indeed an illegitimate child." Even Hancock, who has always been cold and arrogant, couldn't help but tease him with a smile. The peerless smile that should have been alluring and moving fell into the eyes of Mr. 3, but it was full of sarcasm and ridicule. His face darkened instantly. Showing the same gloomy expression as him was the young man who called himself Jaru Og. Looking at it from the perspective of a passerby, the two people who already have a little similar appearance are really fucking. It's a bit like father and son. Ha 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 ha. Buggy saw this, slapped the table directly, and laughed even more cheerfully. Harsh clown laughter echoed in the suddenly silent reception room. "Another short-sighted idiot." Gal Ruo cursed in a low voice, and walked towards Buggy. Just as he was about to teach this ignorant guy a lesson, he suddenly noticed Hancock, who was smiling like a flower beside him, like a peerless goddess descending. Hey, top-notch, how can you still meet such a top-quality beauty?" Looking at Mr. 3, whose face was getting darker and darker beside him, Buggy was overjoyed, turned around and said to the beautiful receptionist. "Hey, manager, didn't you just say that you would invite the loud guy out?" The indifference on the face of the beautiful receptionist has been replaced by a vague panic at some point. "My friend, please don't say a few words." The cold voice even pleaded, as he said, "He is the illegitimate son of the great pirate Mr. 3 who shocked the world, and those followers behind him are even more ferocious pirates with a bounty of tens of millions. Our entire casino will cease to exist." Hearing these words, Buggy was speechless. "Standing here, you don't like to answer me, but you are so afraid of a little Mr. 3 illegitimate child? Wait, Mr. 3's illegitimate son? Puff." Wanting this, he couldn't help laughing. The current Garo straight is all focused on Hancock, so naturally he can't hear Buggy's piercing laughter. "Hey, take this girl away," he turned and said to the pirates behind him. "Understood, Sir Garazi." The muscular pirates were very respectful and walked in front of Hancock with no expression on their faces. Just when they were about to make a move, just when they were about to die, the door of the casino was suddenly pushed open. The son of the dignified Candle Demon Army Master, actually touches a beautiful lady in public. It's really disgusting. Bright light came in, and a group of men in strange clothes came slowly to Guruji and the others. Where did you come from? I'm the one. Poochie. Just as the arrogant Guruji was about to show off his name, a fist the size of a sandbag hit him head on. Boom. Powerful force poured out, hammering him upside down on the spot and smashing him into the bar. In an instant, the wine bottle fell, the planks were broken, and sawdust was flying all over the sky. It was you, the illegitimate son of the Crusaders' Candle Demon Army Master, who beat you. The person who made the shot was tall and strong, with a dark complexion, and was wearing a colorful and strange cloak. Dare to fight with us? It seems that you are ready to bear the wrath from the Cross Union? The expressions of the pirates following Guruji changed, and they drew out their weapons and muskets without hesitation. The strange thing is that the newly emerged group of people stood still, with more or less joking smiles on their faces, and they didn't have the slightest idea of fighting back. Wait, you are this year's supernova, the superglue Lars Adama with a bounty of 500 million? Someone recognized the leading pirate in a colorful cape. Hee, I have some eyesight, but unfortunately not much. Lars Adama smiled lightly, stepped forward, and walked towards Garazi, who was lying on the ground calmly. When they passed those pirates with tens of millions of bounties, they froze in place, letting each other pass them by. Hey! What the hell are you doing? Hurry up and fuck me. Do you still want to join the Cross Union? Looking at Lars Adama, who was approaching step by step, Guruji panicked at that moment and yelled at his younger brothers. It's not their fault, if they can move, Lars Adama reminded. At this moment, Guruji noticed belatedly that the feet and the entire body of the pirates following him were glued to the ground with crystal clear superglue, unable to move. That doesn't appear to be any ordinary glue. So, can we have a good talk now? Lars Adama said coldly. A huge shadow covered it, bringing a terrifying aura of oppression. Guruji, who was lying on the ground, panicked completely. While kicking his legs back desperately, he still did not forget to show the name of Candle Demon Army Master. Don't come here. Tell you, my father is the second in command of the Four Emperors Cross, the Chief of Staff Mr. 3. If you dare to touch me, the Crusaders will absolutely tear you to pieces. Lars Adama stretched out his hands to pick his ears expressionlessly, then his eyes turned cold, and the breath from his whole body poured out like a beast. Unfortunately, the four emperors that I want to pull down are the Cross Union. He grabbed Guruji, who was paralyzed from fright, fixed his eyes on those trembling pupils, and threatened in a cold voice, so, you'd better be. After all, this supernova, who was as arrogant and fiery as Kid, raised his other hand, took the communication phone bug handed over by his subordinates, and threw it on Guruji's face. Now, just contact me, that candle demon daddy of yours. I want to formally challenge the Cross Union. As soon as these words came out, the gamblers who had come out of the casino early to watch, and the staff of the casino were all so shocked that their eyes jumped out of their sockets. Supernova Superglue Lars Adama wants to challenge the Cross Guild with many Shichibukai? Me. Under the watchful eyes of many expectant eyes, Guruo hesitated, not daring to reach out to pick up the phone bug that fell on the ground. He is a genuine counterfeit, and the only thing that has anything to do with Mr. 3, the famous pirate in the New World, is the similarity in appearance. For an existence of that level, it would be an extravagant wish for him to just take a look at it from a distance, let alone make a bullshit phone call. It really is a counterfeit. Lars Adama saw the answer he wanted from Garazi's expression, and after sighing with disappointment, he raised his hand and threw a ball of translucent superglue towards his head. The glue with a pungent smell instantly deprived Guruji of his sight, hearing, and most importantly, oxygen breathing. Lying on the ground, he shook his limbs wildly, desperately trying to tear off the liquid from his head. As a result, his hands were glued to his forehead, unable to move. In this way, in the suffocation of despair, the fake Mr. 3 illegitimate son gradually lost the signs of life. After getting rid of this boring imposter, Lars Adama, who lost interest, clapped his palms, stood up, and glanced at the three of Mr. 3 with a little surprise. After hearing their bounty and seeing what they did, the three of them were able to remain calm, without any disturbance in their breathing. It seems that even if I don't make a move, this beautiful lady won't suffer any damage. Lars Adama sighed, waved his hand, and turned away with his younger brothers. He just couldn't imagine that the declaration of challenge that the phone bug failed to convey was actually heard by the President and Chief of Staff of the Cross Union in a face-to-face situation. A brat who has never even seen how cruel the world is. Looking at Lasadama's figure gradually going away, Buggy sneered, Supernova Lasadama is really arrogant. But deep in my heart I was ecstatic. Ha ha ha, Shanks, did you see that I am also a supernova who wants to challenge me now? Such a guy can reach the new world alive. After recovering, Mr. 3 regained his composure, glanced at the imposter on the ground who was dying. Let's go to the auction house now. His pace quickened unknowingly, wanting to leave this damned place as soon as possible. Seeing this, Hancock couldn't help but smile again. It was the first time for her to see the extremely confident Mr. 3 showing such an embarrassing gesture. District 1 Town. The pedestrian street, which has always been bustling with excitement, seemed surprisingly quiet at this time. Everyone knelt on the ground, their bodies tensed and stiff, not daring to make any movements to look up. In the center of the road, a man with a resin bubble on his head sat on a burly slave. Several iron chains in his hands spread behind him, linking several blind female slaves. Several bodyguards in armor and black suits accompanied the man, protecting the man in the middle. St. Charles Rose looked left and right while sniffling his snot. In the end, his eyes fell on a beautiful woman who was half embraced by her husband. Hey! I want that woman, bring her to me. Learn. The two armored guards nodded, walked over with cold eyes, picked up the woman and dragged her away amidst the woman's panic screams. As the supreme celestial dragon, as long as it is a woman that St. Charles likes, he can unconditionally take her away as his wife, and throw it away until he gets tired of playing. This is the privilege that Tianlong people have. My lord, please let my wife go, she just found out that she is pregnant. Just don't take my wife away, I can do anything for you. Kneeling on the ground, he grabbed his wife's arm tightly, his supposedly firm and steady face was full of pleading. Perhaps there is still some conscience in the heart. The two powerful guards did not use violence to drive the man away, but just stood still while arresting him. Boom. Just when they were expecting Lord Charles Rose to let them go with a tone full of disgust after hearing that the woman was pregnant, piercing gunshots sounded from behind. The begging man was shot and fell to the ground, his chest pierced by the bullet overflowed with bright red blood, instantly dyeing the verdant grass red. If that's the case, then just obediently die for me, lowly thing. St. Charles Rose put away the golden pistol in his hand, and pulled the slave chain in his hand. As a celestial dragon who doesn't even want to breathe air with other people, when he heard that a woman was pregnant, he immediately lost the interest to continue. The strong slave lying on the ground immediately understood what he meant, turned his head, and crawled cautiously towards the auction house at the end of the street, for fear of even the slightest jolt. Seeing this, the two guards let go of the woman who was struggling fiercely in their hands lightly, followed St. Charles indifferently, and walked away slowly. The woman who stumbled to her husband burst into tears. Heart-piercing cries in this street filled with the smell of gunpowder. Everyone just lay silently on the ground, lowered their heads without any reaction. Can't look directly, can't resist, and absolutely obey. This is the Tianlong people in their eyes. At this time, the roof of a house on the street. Hee. Is this the world's aristocratic celestial dragon who claims to be the descendant of the creator? It really is as disgusting as the rumors say. Looking at the Tianlong people who were gradually going away, Buggy couldn't help but let out a sigh of emotion. He thinks he is not a good person, but compared with a cruel and innocent bastard like Tianlongren, he is really far behind. Compared to what they did in this world, this kind of thing is simply not unusual. Mr. 3's voice revealed a coldness. The black sunglasses used to disguise his true face covered his expression, and he couldn't see the eyes hidden underneath. Dragon people. Standing beside them, Hancock's entire body was trembling uncontrollably. Looking at the uniquely shaped figure sitting on the slave, all kinds of images of being a slave in the past emerged uncontrollably in front of her eyes. The Tianlongren slave imprint on her back was aching. It was a nightmare that she could not get rid of all this time. Buggy saw Hancock's abnormal reaction, and couldn't help but wonder. When did Hancock, a cold-blooded and heartless guy, become so righteous? He who didn't know what Hancock had encountered before took it for granted that she was trembling with anger. Hancock, are you okay? We're going to the auction house next, Mr. 3 reminded aloud. Hancock, who had always been decisive in killing, showed a rare hesitation at this time. The words slave auction house had a huge lethal effect on her. That was the beginning of the dark period she had been through. I can't solve any problem by avoiding it all the time. Only by facing it with courage can you completely cut off the fragility in your heart and become a true king of the sea. Mr. 3 looked directly into Hancock's eyes, without concealing the threat in his words. Hancock, I believe in you. Standing in the auction house and watching the evil deeds of the Tinlongren with her own eyes, this is definitely the cruelest torture for her. But if you don't do anything, Hancock will never get out of the shadow in his heart, and he will never be able to comprehend a more powerful and perfect domineering look. Therefore, in order to be more powerful for the high-end combat power of the Cross Guild, and even Hancock himself, Mr. 3 must persecute him with such a strong attitude. It's just an auction. Just go in. What courage is needed? Although his heart was full of resistance, Hancock still brushed the hair that fell on the side of his face, and said arrogantly, Mr. 3, don't underestimate the concubine's body. Mr. 3 quickly saw through Hancock's stubbornness, but he didn't expose it, but said with a smile, in that case, let's go in now. Just as he was about to step away, the gloomy Hancock suddenly asked for no reason. What if I really can't help but do it? Although she hated the celestial dragons extremely and wished to tear them into pieces, it was obvious that now was far from the time to take action against the celestial dragons. Doing it in advance will not only disrupt Mr. 3's entire plan, and even be a little careless, it will also force the Cross Union, which is in a steady development stage, into a dangerous situation of confronting the Navy and the world government head-on. As I said just now, Hancock, I believe in you. Mr. 3 smiled and repeated what he said just now. Hearing this, Hancock's pupils shrank, and he froze in place. Obviously, such a pure and unquestionable concise answer was completely beyond her expectation. If you trust a former Shichibukai casually, you will pay an unbearable price. The pirate empress remained stubborn. From Mr. 3's fearless domineering, she knew that he, who was also a slave, had completely walked out of that dark shadow. Even such a wretched and lustful man can do it. As the unparalleled emperor of the Amazon Lily Kingdom, she can definitely do it too. Buggy, who had heard all the conversation between the two, was a little dazed. After hearing the end and confirming that the two were discussing the matter of attacking the Tinlongren, he was not calm at the time. Eh? Can't help but want to attack the Tinlongren? Are you kidding? You must be kidding, right? Mr. 3 was shocked when he saw Buggy's sincere appearance. The slogan when they recruited Chi Wuhai was very loud, that is, to overthrow the rule of Tianlong people and liberate the whole world. If Buggy showed excessive avoidance and fear towards the Tinlongren, it might arouse Hancock's suspicion. So, he had a flash of inspiration, and sarcastically said, why, are you scared, Buggy? If the red-haired Shanks were here, he would definitely behave calmer and calmer than you, right? Sure enough, as long as red hair is mentioned, Buggy's strong competitive spirit will immediately completely replace all Kongshin. What? That bastard with the red hair is nothing. If I want to, I can send those scumbags a bucket-made ammunition at any time. A slightly dim auction house. With the entry of the main personnel headed by the Tianlong people and the announcement of the staff, the slave auction, which symbolizes the evil of the world, officially began. As the most honored guest in the audience, Charles Rose sat in the very center of the venue, surrounded by prominent figures in the whole island of Chambord. Around them, there are two men in suits wearing black sunglasses guarding them. At the same time, in every corner of the auction house, there are more than a dozen not too weak auras hidden. They are all elite sailors stationed in the Chambord Islands. That's right, at this critical juncture of encircling and suppressing the supernovas, the Navy still dispatched a strong team to be responsible for the safety of the Tianlong people. There is no way, after all, 2 years ago, the Straw Hat Boy Luffy did something to the celestial dragons in this auction house, and they must ensure that the same thing will not happen again. The three of Mr. 3 sat peacefully in the most inconspicuous corner of the auction house. The purpose of their trip is very simple and rude, that is to use money to take down Rayleigh, who has pledged to the auction house. Of course, for Hancock, there is also the extremely important thing of overcoming the fear in his heart. Therefore, the defensive force deployed in the entire venue has no effect on them at all. Mr. 3's eyeballs rolled slightly, and fell on Hancock, who was trying to suppress his emotions beside him. Although he does trust Hancock deep in his heart, he also has to prepare for the worst and stop it in time before it happens. Now is indeed not the best time to take action against the Tianlong people. If it is not handled properly, many previous preparations will be in vain. They don't have the background of naval heroes like Luffy. They are still alive and kicking after beating the celestial dragon. Nothing happened. Click click. While thinking, the bright headlights of the auction house shone down and gathered on a woman with an enchanting figure on the home court. Dear Lord Tianlong, and all the guests, let you just wait. Today's auction has very good goods, and its explosiveness is guaranteed to satisfy you. After deftly arousing the anticipation and carnival of the audience, the auctioneer spread his hands, showing a broad mind. As the auctioneer of this slave auction, I announce that today's auction will start now. Then without further ado, please submit the first lot of today, a rare long-handed man. Under the signal of the auctioneer, the staff behind the scenes pushed a long-handed man wearing a slave collar to the front of the stage. The lights converged in an instant, illuminating the pale-faced man with difficulty opening his eyes. Long-handed race, is the first one a rare race? Although it is a rare race, there is nothing special about it except that it has more elbow joints than ordinary people. That's right, if it's a beautiful woman, you can consider keeping it for fun, but it's a pity that it's a useless man. The people who participated in the auction talked a lot, just like they were talking about an ordinary piece of pork in the vegetable market, pointing at the slaves on the field. The ruthless ridicule was overwhelming, and soon defeated the psychological defense of the long-handed slaves. He squatted on the ground shivering, his pupils lost focus, and he was so desperate that he didn't even dare to have the thought of running for his life. Once he did so, what greeted him would be extremely cruel and merciless whipping. In the end, this long-handed slave was bought by a rich businessman wearing gold and silver at a price of 500 million Baileys. After witnessing the whole auction process, Hancock's pupils constricted, he gritted his teeth, and his fists under the chair were bloodshot. In her eyes at this moment, the desperate-looking slave on the field did not seem to be a long-handed man, but three little girls cuddling together helplessly. Indifferent eyes, ruthless sarcasm and ridicule, the attitude of looking down on others. Exactly the same scene as back then. Mr. 3 noticed Hancock's increasingly intense killing intent, but his face was calm and indifferent, and he didn't do anything, even if he just spoke a few words of comfort. This silent battle needs and must be borne by Hancock himself. Facts have proved that Mr. 3's judgment and trust are correct. Apart from a slight trembling of his body, Hancock didn't act recklessly. It's a very good start. If she can continue to watch the entire auction and see Tinlongren's auction methods with her own eyes, she can basically make up for the flaws in Bewang's color. This is indeed very cruel and tormenting for Hancock, but Mr. 3 has no other choice. After the deal with the long-handed man was finalized, the second slave to appear was a thin but energetic old man with disheveled white hair and glasses. The three of Mr. 3, who did not expect to see Rayleigh so soon, sat up straight in an instant. Even Hancock, who was in fear of the past, relaxed his tense body at this time, and calmed down a lot. As one of the very few elders in this world who she can rely on wholeheartedly, Rayleigh's appearance is undoubtedly a booster. Then, this is the second product. Although he is a bad old man, he is very good in terms of appearance and temperament. And we have identified him, he has a very strong body, some guests with special preferences must not miss it. The starting price is 100 million Baileys. The auctioneer tried hard to sell Rayleigh, who wore a slave collar around his neck. In the original plan, this uncharacteristic old man was not eligible for this auction. But he took the initiative to mortgage himself to the auction. The situation was quite special and the value was not high, so he was arranged for the second auction that received the least attention. TCH, what a bad old man. It's not as good as those stronger slaves, who can still be used to do hard work. Don't tell me, it looks pretty handsome if you look closely, but I don't know if the ability in that aspect is okay. Unlike the lively situation in the first auction, this time only a few people were talking in low voices. Everyone else was silent, obviously not interested in this old slave man. If this group of disgusted people knew that the one standing on the stage at this moment was Rayleigh, the vice captain of One Piece Roger, would they have a wonderful look on their faces? After a few auction price hikes, Buggy successfully bid for Rayleigh at a price of 300 million Baileys. This amount is completely insignificant to him now. That is, when the trading hammer fell, a fleeting smile appeared on the corner of Rayleigh's mouth. Although Buggy dyed the red nose, which is the most revealing identity, black, the round shape has not changed at all, including his voice. Coupled with Hancock, who is disguised in a fancy way but can be recognized at a glance, after a little association, Rayleigh recognized the identity of the person who photographed him. So far, the ultimate goal of this auction was fortunately completed without the Tianlong people disrupting the situation. The rest is completely Hancock's personal battlefield. While the auction was going on, the navies who had collected all the information about the supernova secretly carried out a siege and capture operation. After all, he is a super rookie who can stand out in this chaotic era. Even if the Navy dispatches many elites, it is obviously unrealistic to arrest the supernovas scattered in the Chambord Islands with this combat power alone. Therefore, General Lu Niu personally participated in this important operation. Said to be personally involved, in fact, he himself is still sleeping in a hammock at the naval base. Following the actions of many naval forces are 6 vegetative people with wooden stakes as their main bodies. Just like Doflamingo's Thread clone and Robin's Wawa clone, this is not a difficult task for Green Bull, who is capable of dense fruits. So, when the residents of the Chambord Islands were still ignorant, the battle between the Navy and the supernova started quietly. Although the supernovas who sensed the danger fought back immediately, how could they, who had not fully grown up at this time, be the opponents of the Admiral of the Navy headquarters? As time went by, all the supernovas were arrested without exception. On the other side, Mr. 3 and others, who had finished the auction, were on their way to Shocky's rape bar. There were 2 of them, Buggy and Rayleigh in front, Mr. 3 and Hancock in the back. Ha ha ha. I didn't expect that stinky brat who was fearless back then is now the Emperor of the Sea who dominates one side. Raleigh, who had removed the collar of the slave, laughed, raised his fist and rubbed Buggy's head, just like he did on Roger's boat more than 30 years ago. Bastard Rayleigh. I'm no longer the brat I used to be. Buggy was so angry that his teeth became jagged. But he didn't stop Raleigh's offensive action, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't dare. He could vaguely feel the strong arrogance wrapped around the fist on his head. If he resisted at this time, he would definitely be the one who got beaten in the end. Really? It doesn't look like there is any change. Rayleigh still had a smile on his handsome face. It can be clearly felt that after seeing Buggy, the kid who grew up watching him, he was in a very good mood. Stop talking nonsense, Raleigh. I didn't take you out of the auction to hear you talk about these old things, Buggy said angrily. Whether it's Rayleigh, Shanks, or Whitebeard, this guy is really arrogant to these familiar top powerhouses. Oh? Rayleigh withdrew his fist and let out a doubt. Buggy took advantage of the situation and briefly talked about the invitation to him to be the guardian of the Cross Guild. So that's how it is. I've been retired for so many years, and now is the time for you young people. Looking up at the sky above the Chambord Islands, Rayleigh sighed with emotion. As a remnant of the old era, I am very satisfied to be able to live in the Chambord Islands. Hearing this, Buggy frowned slightly. I thought Raleigh was tactfully refusing, but I didn't expect him to say next. However, the Amazon Lily Kingdom has an extraordinary meaning to Shaki. When I have time in 2 days, I will go to the new daughter's place to have a look, and by the way, let's go to Kale Bali. What was expressed in the vague and hazy words was a fairly clear answer. Rayleigh, you guy, I knew you were super loyal. Buggy was so moved that tears streamed down his face. As for whether it is true or not, it is unknown. Okay, put away your poor acting skills. Riley saw Buggy's true face at a glance. Looking at this little ghost who has grown up, Shanks in his youth unconsciously appeared in front of his eyes. Speaking of which, your relationship with Shanks should be pretty good, right? I've heard of it, that guy is so strong right now. Hearing this, the touch on Buggy's face disappeared instantly, and turned into deep resentment. The ghost has a very good relationship with him. There is a deep hatred between me and that guy. Is it referring to the fact that he made you eat the devil fruit? Raleigh smiled. That's right. That damn bastard turned me into a landlubber. Buggy's eyes were burning with rage. If used well, the power of the devil fruit may not be a burden. Raleigh glanced at Buggy and said meaningfully, you are not weak, but you are too timid. Bastard. I'm the 4th emperor who even dares to offer a reward to the Navy. Buggy expressed his dissatisfaction with a black face. Ha 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 ha, that's right. Raleigh responded with a hearty laugh. At the same time, Mr. 3 and Hancock, who were walking behind, were also having a conversation between them. Compared with Raleigh and Buggy's relatively happy and relaxed context, Hancock's face looks a little gloomy. Mr. 3, when you were at the auction just now, your reaction was so calm that I couldn't accept it. Hancock spoke out first. Judging from the fiercer and fiercer domineering aura exuding from her body than before, it is not difficult to see that she has successfully overcome the fear of the Tianlong slaves in her heart, and persisted in not acting aggressively until the end of the entire auction. At that time, Hancock was immersed in fear and had no extra energy to pay attention to other things. But after coming out of the auction house and gradually regaining her composure, she belatedly realized something was wrong. As a former Tinlongren slave, Mr. 3's extremely calm performance was too abnormal. Even if he has overcome the fear and despair in his heart, he is no longer afraid of this scene. But no matter what, after going through that kind of hell on earth, when witnessing the whole auction process again, there are more or less emotional fluctuations, and it is absolutely impossible to be calm. The sudden question made Mr. 3 startled. At the auction just now, most of his attention was focused on Hancock, who might go berserk at any time, and the slaves auctioned on the field, so he ignored the fact that he was a fake Tianlong slave. It's weird, isn't it? Speaking of it, I also feel very incredible. Mr. 3's head was running fast, and he spread his hands helplessly. Obviously there is a feeling of déjà vu, but the pictures that can be recalled are very limited. When he disguised himself as a Tianlong slave to gain Hancock's trust, he, who was steady and cautious, gave himself the universal patch of amnesia. By the way, I almost forgot about your amnesia. The gloom on Hancock's pretty face eased a little, revealing a look of sudden realization. Seeing this, Mr. 3 couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. It's okay, it's okay. In other words, the reason why your domineering aura can increase so quickly is not because you have completely defeated yourself, but because of simple amnesia? Reminiscing in this way, Hancock's eyes suddenly became brighter. The depressed mood that was hit by Mr. 3's overly fast-growing overlord color before also became better at this time. Even if I don't have amnesia, I won't be afraid of those damned celestial dragons. Mr. 3 held up his black sunglasses. At such times, he must show absolute determination. The concubine will wait and see. There was a bit of sarcasm in Hancock's words. Mr. 3's appearance fell in her eyes, who had completely overcome her fear, and she naturally became strong and stubborn, who refused to admit defeat. So, what are your plans for the celestial dragons who are currently in the Chambord Islands? Hancock suddenly changed the subject and asked seriously. Before they entered the auction field, they had discussed similar questions and got unified answers. The reason why Hancock brought up this issue again following the words of Mr. 3 is conceivable. She wants to confirm the true thoughts in his heart through Mr. 3's answer. After all, it is Chi Wuhai who has been in the New World for many years, really shrewd and cunning. Mr. 3 even saw through Hancock's intentions. He couldn't answer this question too casually like before, since he had to show absolute hostility to the Tianlong people. It was impossible to be too deliberate. If there is a chance, I will not let that guy leave the Chambord Islands so easily. In the end, Mr. 3 chose this kind of hypothetical answer that was not very clear. Although it may not be able to dispel Hancock's doubts, it is the most conservative and safe answer. Hancock just nodded slightly, but didn't respond. Hey, Mr. 3. You fucking don't go, hurry up, Raleigh said that he wants to get to know you. With a word from Buggy, who was walking in front, the tense atmosphere eased, and Mr. 3 and Hancock quickly followed. At the same time, in the inland sea of the Chambord Islands, celestial dragon St. Charles Ross is sitting on a sexy mermaid, shuttling the sea roads in various regions of Chambord, showing off the new toys he just auctioned to the untouchables kneeling on the ground. Ha ha ha, it's fun, the mermaid is so much fun. St. Charles Rose, who had a snotty nose, laughed happily. In the next second, with a sudden expression, he suddenly pulled out the iron whip in his hand, and slapped the mermaid girl's clean back forcefully. Damn it, swim faster. The face of the mermaid wearing a slave collar was covered with tears, but he didn't dare to disobey the orders of the person on him, so he could only swim forward desperately. Mr. 3 and the others walked forward while chatting, and soon returned to Shaki's rip-off bar. Hey, Shaki, I'm back. Rayleigh, who was the first to enter the door, greeted. Welcome back, Raleigh. Shaki leaned on the bar, raised his eyes to look at the three Mr. 3 who came in behind, and then set his eyes on Rayleigh, whose clothes were slightly dirty. It took a while, and you lost all your money again mortgaged to the auction house. No way, my luck is too bad today. Raleigh scratched his hair and laughed awkwardly. I plan to make a lot of money, it's really shameful, ha ha ha. It's really hard to connect this slovenly old man with the prestigious vice captain of One Piece, Raleigh the Pluto. Isn't that expected? With a smile on his face, Shaki looked at Rayleigh, who was walking slowly to the front of the bar, and took out the cold beer he had prepared in advance and handed it over. Gollum. Rayleigh grabbed the wine glass and poured it with his head up, and the full glass of wine bottomed out in an instant. Sure enough, drinking a glass of cold beer after an exciting adventure is the most wonderful thing. He lost all his gambling chips, mortgaged himself to the auction house, and was rescued by the original crew. Such a miraculous experience is called adventure. After getting along for many years, Shaki has long been accustomed to this, and turned to look at Mr. 3 and others behind Rayleigh. Just got the news that under the leadership of Admiral Green Bull, the Navy officially launched an arrest operation against the 6 supernovas gathered here. If there is no accident, they are very likely to be defeated by the Green Bull now. So fast? Hearing this, Mr. 3, Buggy and Hancock were all shocked. Although the Admiral is definitely crushing the supernova, but it is a bit scary to be able to clash with them and subdue them in such a silent situation. You know, they came all the way from the auction house in Area 1, but they never caught any movement of the battle. Even the Scythe of Evil, Hanamira, who appeared in the bar before. Mr. 3 asked aloud. Hanamira has seen the real faces of the 3 of them, and there seems to be a relationship of mutual trust between them, so he cares more. Probably. Shaki propped his face sideways with one hand, and said in thought, after all, they didn't buy information about the green cow from me. It's only natural for them to be subdued by surprise. This expressionless expression made Mr. 3's pupils shrink suddenly. In the end, it is a big pirate from the last era, it really doesn't show any kindness. If there is no relationship between Hancock and Buggy, even if he has a pirate world view, he might not be fooled by this legendary woman. In that case, then we have to leave here as soon as possible, Mr. 3 said. Although I really want to tell you that you don't need to worry about being exposed, but... Before he finished speaking, Shaki, whose eyes flashed red, suddenly became serious. A group of uninvited guests have come. Rayleigh, who was sitting on the chair, sighed. Soon, Mr. 3 and Hancock also felt the hostility that was gradually gathering towards the bar. It was the elite sailors of the naval base. Found out? No. Mr. 3 carefully perceived the number and aura of the surrounding navy through his knowledge and domineering, and found no particularly powerful existence, let alone an admiral. Soon, the supernova capture mission was successfully completed, and the navy, which was finally able to free up its hands, shouted. Listen up. The trio of criminals inside. You brutally killed the driver of the sightseeing boat, made noise in the central streets and killed several innocent civilians, seriously endangering the order and security of the Chambord Islands. I advise you to raise your hands and surrender now. Accept arrest. The righteous and awe-inspiring words made everyone in the bar instantly understand their purpose of coming, and at the same time, Mr. 3 couldn't help but want to laugh. What they took away was the den of traffickers who wanted to kidnap Hancock and sell them in an auction house, armed with various guns and artillery. When did the traffickers become innocent civilians in the Chambord Islands? Just because the celestial dragons allow such a system to exist? Ha ha ha, I didn't expect you to make such a commotion in such a short period of time. After roughly understanding what happened, Rayleigh, who was drinking beer leisurely, laughed and said, I can't help you with this kind of thing. After all, openly confronting the Navy is a very troublesome thing. The Navy is naturally aware of his existence, but as Garp said earlier, the retired Raleigh has long since quit the sea battle. In this case, there is absolutely no need for them to waste their extra troops to provoke this legendary pirate. Understood, we can solve this kind of trivial matter by ourselves, Mr. 3 said to himself. I will find time to go to Kale Bali in the future, but let's talk about it later. Riley waved his hand in response. The simple conversation and the many reports in the newspapers made him quite interested in this shrewd, powerful, and extremely tolerant junior. That's my honor. Mr. 3 smiled back. After saying goodbye briefly, he rushed out of the bar with Buggy and Hancock. Bang bang bang. The moment they appeared, the navy that had already surrounded this place mercilessly pulled the trigger. All of a sudden, dense bullets roared towards them. Candlewall. Obviously, this kind of ordinary shooting can't do anything to the 3 of Mr. 3. Under the cover of the gray-white candlewall, they broke through the encirclement with almost no hindrance, and retreated towards the small merchant ships docked on the shore in the distance. However, they underestimated the investigative capabilities of the Chambord's navy. On the way to the small merchant ship in charge, there were actually many sailors in ambush. It seems that our whereabouts have been thoroughly investigated. Looking at the densely packed sea soldiers in front of him, the corner of Mr. 3's mouth slightly raised. It's a good method, but it's a pity. The combat power scent is too weak. Boom. He casually threw out a ball of dark gray candles with explosive properties, abruptly blasting a passage in the Navy's ambush circle. Before the smoke and dust from the candle explosion dissipated, Hancock turned into a black shadow and shuttled past. While the long legs were shaking, countless sailors flew upside down and fell heavily on the ground, life or death unknown. In the face of absolute strength, no matter how tight the Navy's deployment is, it seems vulnerable. Under the horizontal push of Mr. 3 and Hancock, the three of them soon came to the shore of Area 13. Standing in front of them was the last group of sailors left. "Wait a minute. Leave these guys to me." Buggy uttered a sound to stop Mr. 3 and the two who were about to make a move, and a crazy smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. "It's just a good time to take these guys and try my newly developed super bucket ammunition. No matter the speed or power, it is far beyond the past." Thinking of the showmanship that Mr. 3 and Hancock were showing off just now, Buggy jumped up not to be outdone, wanting to spin around in the air and then launch super buggy bullets from the soles of his feet chicly. If there is no accident, the group of sea soldiers in front will definitely be wiped out. However, the accident still happened. When landing, he accidentally slipped his foot and hit the splits. The buggy bullet that was supposed to hit the sailors was deviated and flew towards the side sea route. At this time, St. Charles Rose, the celestial dragon, was riding his slave mermaid, passing by quickly. Immediately after, with a boom under Buggy's horrified eyes, the powerful Buggy's bomb happened to land on the head of St. Charles Ross. Thick smoke from special bombs filled the water. After a short period of sluggishness, the expressions of Mr. 3, Buggy and even Hancock became quite exaggerated. Eyeballs popped out of their sockets, jaws fell to the ground, and two snots slipped from their nostrils, gently blowing in the silent breeze. Swaying. 1 second before the bomb exploded, they clearly saw the Tianlong man wearing the resin bubble. Showing the same expression as them, there are also a group of sailors around, as well as many Secret Service guards following behind the Tianlong people. It happened so suddenly that the bomb exploded on Tinlongren's head, and everyone hadn't fully reacted yet. Charles Rose, Saint of the Roswolds, shelled out. "How dare someone attack the Supreme Celestial Dragon? Who the hell is that bastard?" All of a sudden, all the eyes of the audience came together, and they fell on Buggy, who was posing for the splits. "Aha!" Buggy blinked his rounded eyes cutely. Knowing that he seemed to have caused huge trouble by being careless, he didn't hesitate at all, and immediately dumped the pot on his own siblings and good brothers. "Ahahaha, as expected of you three, you even expected the Tianlong people to appear in this kind of place riding a mermaid slave." The panic on Buggy's face dissipated little by little, and he looked at Mr. 3 with admiration in his eyes. "I have perfectly followed your plan. What else do I need to do next?" Mr. 3. "Fuck your sister's Buggy. When did I give you a plan to attack the Tianlong people?" 10,000 grass and mud horses galloped past in my heart. He was about to open his mouth to spit blood on Buggy, a bastard who did not succeed in doing anything, but Hancock beside him suddenly had his legs go limp, and he slumped on the ground exhausted. "Mr. 3, I didn't expect it to be true that you said that you would not let the Tianlong people leave easily. Damn it, the concubine is really damned, to be suspicious of a man like you who keeps his word." Even the pirate empress, who is famous for her coldness and ruthlessness, couldn't help covering her face and crying when she saw Mr. 3, guiding Buggy to bombard the Tianlong people, and the tears overflowed from her fingertips and dripped to the ground. Seeing this, Mr. 3's words had already reached the mouth of his throat, and he swallowed them back abruptly. "No kidding, if you deny it at this time, you will definitely die on the spot. Things have happened, and no amount of explanation will help." His head was running fast, thinking about the next countermeasures. The nature of killing a few human traffickers is completely different. The consequences of attacking the Tianlong people are very serious. They will be hunted down by the world government and navy at all costs. It will be a matter of time before their identities are exposed. After all, when they dealt with the sea soldiers just now, they used the very recognizable fruit ability. As a result, even if they can return to Kale Bali safely, the situation is not optimistic. To put it seriously, it would be an all-out war. And Blackbeard, who heard this kind of news, would definitely take action, trying his best to snatch the Empress and even cannibalize the Cross-Union. At that time, the Crusaders will be under the enemy's back and forth, and need to face the attack of the navy and the 4 emperors at the same time. And many more. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration flashed deep in Mr. 3's mind. Etc. Blackbeard, Hancock, Draco. Got it. With a plan in mind, Mr. 3 slightly raised the corners of his mouth, and brushed his chin beard proudly. Buggy, who was running around in a hurry, saw his sinister appearance, and immediately knew that this guy had a countermeasure, and the expression on his face couldn't help becoming arrogant. "Good job, President Buggy, so my plan has completed the most critical step." Mr. 3 laughed and said, "It's time for the world to see our madness." "Ahahaha, after all, I trust you unconditionally, my chief of staff." Buggy put his hands on his hips, held his head high, and smiled wildly. In the next second, his style of painting changed suddenly, and he flashed onto Mr. 3's face, and asked in a mysterious whisper, "So what are we going to do now, 3, run away?" Mr. 3 raised his hand to move his dirty face away, and said confidently, "Don't worry, I have a plan." After all, under the watchful eyes of Buggy and Hancock, whose eyes became strange after he regained his composure, he took a slow step and walked towards the celestial dragon floating on the water. Perhaps because of the protection of the resin bubbles on the head of this guy, even though the extremely noble celestial dragon clothing on his body was blown to pieces, he just lost consciousness and could feel the remaining signs of life. Mr. 3 is very fortunate that this damned celestial dragon can be so hard-working. Quick! Stop that crazy guy. Damn thug, do you know what you're doing? That's the supreme celestial dragon. Where is General Aramu? Hurry up and inform General Aramu. The celestial dragon guards reacted and rushed to the front of Mr. 3 at an extremely fast speed, blocking his way forward. Almost at the same time, all the sailors with weapons gathered from behind and surrounded Mr. 3. Just when they swarmed up and wanted to kill the person in front of them no matter what the cost. Mr. 3 calmly took off the black sunglasses, fumbled in his pocket, took out the transparent goggles and put them on. Then he slowly raised his eyes and casually looked at the crowd who had already slaughtered him. The dark red thunder and lightning jumped, and at this moment, the domineering arrogance that made the world change color completely bloomed, sweeping the entire plane. Sure enough, it's more comfortable to wear this thing. 2 seconds later, Mr. 3 habitually held up the goggles without turning his head, just strolling towards the motionless Tinlongren lying on the mermaid beauty. Plop, plop, plop. Behind him, groups of marines, guards, and bodyguards all turned their eyes white. Their weapons and cannons slipped from their hands, and they passed out straight on the ground. Bah, domineering and domineering? Galdino, you bastard, you bastard? Although it was only a short 2 seconds, Buggy still felt very clearly the terrifying arrogance that penetrated into the bone marrow and even the soul. Mr. 3 is not joking, he has really awakened his domineering look. And it's still so powerful and terrifying. When I first found out, the concubine was also taken aback. It's hard to imagine how his domineering look was practiced. A strange color flickered in Hancock's beautiful watery eyes, thinking that Buggy was lamenting the growth of Mr. 3's dominance. She didn't know how stupid she was before, until she saw that Mr. 3 dared to calculate even the Tianlong people. For such a man, amnesia or not, it doesn't have much impact at all. He really dares to speak and do, without any scruples. Under Buggy's eyes deformed with jealousy, Mr. 3 made wax step by step, stepping on the candle plate to the side of the mermaid on the water. After a series of hellish encounters, and being startled by the roar of artillery fire, this mermaid with long blue hair, extremely good looks, and a perfect figure is completely dumbfounded at this moment. Lost focus. Mr. 3 glanced at the slightly twitching celestial dragon on the back of the mermaid, and slowly squatted down, keeping his eyes on par with the mermaid. Seeing this human stretch out his hands towards her, the mermaid was obviously taken aback, shaking her body and trying to escape, but was tightly restrained by the slave collar around her neck. She has seen it with her own eyes, as long as she defies humans and escapes, the collar will explode immediately. Don't worry, I have no malice, don't be afraid. Mr. 3 tried to make his tone sound a little more kind. However, this kind of forced tenderness is even more sinister and terrifying in the eyes of the mermaid. She stepped back again. Sister, don't be afraid that you didn't hear me. Mr. 3's eyes suddenly became vicious. What? The mermaid whose upper body was floating on the water was immediately frightened, and closed her eyes resignedly. She remembered the warnings of the old women of Fishman Island. If you are captured by vicious and insidious humans, don't try to resist, it will only make them more excited and use more violence. Taking advantage of this gap, Mr. 3 reached out with both hands, and directly grabbed her smooth and fair. A collar around the neck. HMPH, since I mastered the high-level Liuying, I haven't tried how it feels to remove a collar with bare hands. Mr. 3, who couldn't wait to try it, wrapped the armed domineering collar on both palms, controlled its flow to the collar, and then pulled it hard. Pat. The hard collar that was destroyed from the inside was torn off like foam, and as Mr. 3 threw it casually, it exploded in the air with a boom. Simply perfect. Ah, you, the mermaid, who had already prepared for the worst, opened her eyes, and immediately realized that the collar on her neck had disappeared. Didn't I just say that? I don't mean anything malicious. Mr. 3 patted the dust on his hands and laughed. Thank you. Thank you. The blue-haired mermaid was still a little dazed, with a dreamlike sense of unreality floating on her pretty face. Mr. 3 stretched out his hand again, and grabbed the celestial dragon Charles Rose, who had passed out on the mermaid's back. After weighing it a few times and making sure that this guy still has some breath, he said in a low voice, "You're welcome, I just don't like the behavior of this kind of scum. You are free now. Go back to the bottom of the sea again. Don't run to the surface of the sea if you have nothing to do. Now is not the time for you to enjoy the sunshine at will." After finishing speaking, he turned around while carrying Charles Rose and left gracefully. Well, even if you say that, I am very, very grateful to you. The mermaid floating on the water folded her arms and bowed deeply towards the back of Mr. 3. Mr. 3 stopped, turned around and said, "You don't have to be so polite. If you insist on thanking me, I don't mind letting you come up and give me a hug." The nature of the old color critic was fully exposed at this moment. The poor mermaid's personality is too simple and kind. Out of gratitude to her savior, she jumped out of the water without hesitation. She opened her arms and gave Mr. 3 a big hug in every respect. So fragrant, so soft. The stinky and shameless old pervert immediately showed a look of resentment. Of course, now was not the time to take advantage of it first, and soon, Mr. 3 took the initiative to gently push the mermaid away. "My name is Vicari. Yes, may I have your name? In this sea, everyone calls me Third Brother." "Huh. Third Brother. What a nice and handsome name. Can we meet again in the future?" "Most likely. I don't have any plans to go to Fishman Island at the moment." "Oh, that. Thank you again for saving your life." Chirp. Mr. 3 carried the dead pig like Charles Rose, staring blankly at the rippling water surface. After a few seconds of silence, he raised his other hand to wipe off the remaining saliva on his cheek, turned around cursing and left, and came to Buggy and Hancock. "3, your domineering look, when exactly?" Buggy was still immersed in Mr. 3's overbearing arrogance just now, unable to extricate himself, and didn't notice what happened just now. "I'll tell you about this in detail later." Mr. 3 raised the Charos in his hand, threw it on the ground like throwing garbage, and said, "Get this guy back on the boat first. Don't let him die, it's still useful to keep it." "Ah. Aren't we going to escape? There are generals on this island now." Buggy, who came back to his senses, showed a very sincere side. "That's why we need to wait here for him to come over." Mr. 3 looked firmly at the central area of the Chambord Islands. It can be clearly felt that an extremely powerful aura is constantly approaching here. Buggy was taken aback immediately. "What are you talking about? Waiting for the Green Bull?" "That's right. Those Marines are so useless, they all passed out. I need someone to help me deliver the message." Let the general deliver the news for us." Buggy's eyes became more suspicious. Seeing this guy's anxious look, Mr. 3 looked straight into his eyes with a rare serious expression. "Buggy, we have already passed the embarrassing period when we met the Admiral and were about to run away. Now we. But the Emperor of the Sea, who is famous all over the world and who is powerful in the New World." Those two simple words made Buggy's blood boil. At this moment, the cowardly man seemed to be infected, and his complexion became darker. 3. I didn't expect you to have such awareness. If so, then I'll leave it to you here. Take the daunting task of bringing the celestial dragons back to the ship, just leave it to me with peace of mind." After all, Buggy, who was handsome for less than 3 seconds, showed his true colors. He lifted the Tinlongren on the ground and ran towards the shore. "Fuck. This bastard." Mr. 3 was greatly shocked, and sighed helplessly. He looked back at Hancock. "Hancock, you go back with Buggy." Affected by the attack on the celestial dragons, Hancock unknowingly used an honorific to Mr. 3. "Ah? Yes. Wait. What about you?" she asked quickly after she realized it. Mr. 3 raised his hand and pushed the goggles. His eyes were deep and full of force, and he said, "The Admiral is not easy to fool. Someone has to stop him here, isn't it? In that case, let the concubine come with you." Hancock knows how terrifying the Admiral is, so he resolutely chooses to stay and face Mr. 3 together. "No, it's more important to be optimistic about the Tianlong people. I'm not very relieved if it's only Buggy." However, Mr. 3 softly rejected her request to fight side by side. Seeing that Hancock still wanted to speak, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he stared directly at him. "Don't you trust me as a companion?" Hancock was a little stunned by the stares, but she wasn't the kind of shy woman. After a solemn confession, she turned and chased after Buggy, who had run away. Be sure to survive. Boom boom boom. In the second after Hancock left, a green shadow covering the sky swept over from the distant town. In the blink of an eye, the entire plain where Mr. 3 is located is covered. That is a huge forest that is constantly expanding. In the front of the huge forest, the huge tree twisted and changed a little bit, turning into an angry green cow grazing. Which life or death thing is it that actually attacked the noble Tinlongren under the eyes of Lao Tzu? Mr. 3 stood there without fear. Compared with the huge forest covering the sky, his body is so small that it is hard to notice. After seeing the green bull appear on the stage, Mr. 3 took a deep breath and shouted to Buggy and Hancock, who ran away. President Buggy, leave this to me, please be optimistic about the Tianlong people. That's an important bargaining chip in the deal with Blackbeard. At the same time as the words fell, the hard ground under his feet was instantly assimilated into a vast expanse of fluid wax. The endless forest and the Candle Ocean are fighting each other, occupying one side of the world. The battle with General Green Bull has officially begun. Shaggy's rip-off bar. Ha 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 ha, Buggy is as arrogant as he was 30 years ago. Just after he said that he was timid and afraid of getting into trouble, he turned around and bombarded the Tianlong people. How dare he do it? Raleigh, who was sitting at the bar, laughed loudly. With such a big commotion outside, it is naturally impossible to hide legendary pirates like him and Shacky. The green cows are here too, do you want to help them? Shacky calmly smoked a cigarette. Raleigh turned sideways, letting his snow-white hair hang down, and the lenses of his glasses reflected bright light. I don't know their purpose for doing this yet. Let's take a look. As the 4 emperors, it would be too disappointing for me to be caught by the generals so easily. Now the 3 of Buggy are completely different from the Luffy pirates who were powerless in front of the Yellow Monkey 2 years ago. They should and must have the means to contend with the general. That's true, especially that Mr. 3, the aura emanating from his body even made me feel a little bit of danger. Recalling the contact with Mr. 3 just now, a flash of surprise flashed across Shocky's calm face. Not long ago, this man was apparently a small person who couldn't make it to the scene. I want to see how far such a guy can go. This is also one of the reasons why I promised Buggy to become the guardian of the Cross Guild. The corners of Raleigh's slightly vicissitudes of mouth rose slightly. The era of chaos is also the era of heroes, Shacky said with emotion. Boom. Suddenly, there was an earth-shattering roar outside, and even the ground under his feet trembled. The infinite forest of the Green Bull and the ocean of candles of Mr. 3 finally collide with each other in an extremely domineering manner. Behind the green cow, towering trees stretched out from the ground, and thick vines meandered like giant snakes, carrying countless flowers and trees to form a green torrent. Confronting this green torrent is the off-white domain in which many candle weapons are suspended. Mr. 3 in the center of the domain stands proudly, controlling the land that has been assimilated into candles, continuously flocking to the terrifying forest ahead. Flowers, plants, trees and candles are opposed to each other, killing and annihilating each other, and finally return to tranquility. The first confrontation after the 2 sides met ended in a tie. Of course, this does not mean that the strength of the 2 is evenly matched. After all, this is just a greeting. Surging sea of candles, you guy, are you Mr. 3, the candle magician strategist of the Cross Guild? The green bull parted from the ruffled stump, the admiral's cloak of justice fluttering in the wind. Through such obvious fruitability, he quickly recognized the person who blocked him. Oh, it's really an honor. I didn't expect the admiral to know me. Mr. 3 looked at the green bull with a smile on his lips. The iconic 3-word hairstyle stood up again, burning with raging flames. It's strange if you don't know a man who stirs up the world like you. Speaking of this, the green bull's eyes gradually became sharper, and he roared, how dare you attack and kidnap the noble Tianlong people, are you all crazy, the Cross Guild and Blackbeard. Whoosh whoosh. Looking at Buggy and Hancock who had already run away, several wooden stump men suddenly sprang out from the infinite forest behind the green bull, chasing them in different directions at a very fast speed. Knowing that the Mr. 3 in front of him is not easy to deal with, he wants to stop the clown Buggy in this way. In any case, the celestial dragons cannot be kidnapped. Candle soldiers. However, he still underestimated Mr. 3's precise manipulation of Fruit's abilities. In the off-white field, several pieces of candles twisted and wriggled, transforming into candle soldiers of different heights, shorts, fats and thins, leaping forward. Boom. 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 The wooden stakemen sent by the Green Bull were all stopped by the indestructible candle soldiers. Your opponent is me, Lord Admiral. Mr. Three's naturally dangling right arm oozes out a large number of dark gray candles with explosive properties. The candle liquid surged and compressed crazily, and as the fire source fell, it completely turned into a flaming giant fist. This posture. The Green Bull's eyes shrank suddenly. From Mr. Three's punching moves, he actually saw the shadow of Marshal Sakaski? However, Mr. Three didn't intend to give him any time to think and react, so he walked up to him in an instant, and directly punched him. Candle flame breathing. Grumpy grumpy grumpy. The extremely compressed wax was bubbling like magma, and the scorching fire mixed with heat waves shone on the panicked face of the Green Bull. In the next second, a terrifying energy shock wave erupted. Boom. In an instant, the large forest behind the Green Bull was turned into black coke under Mr. Three's fire-breathing candle. After awakening the ability, the candle spews out flames, and its power is so terrifying. I was really taken aback by you. You suddenly used the same move as Sakaski. A dull voice sounded from not far away. At this moment, seeds germinate, vines wind, flowers bloom, and all plants that can represent vitality grow crazily on the scorched land at a speed visible to the naked eye. The burning candle shavings were immediately extinguished, and the Green Bull with a leisurely expression walked out of a giant tree. Of course, he was unscathed. Admiral, it really isn't that easy to deal with. Mr. Three withdrew his right arm that was raised in midair and sighed regretfully. But, there was a determined look in his eyes. Compared with the helpless yellow ape, it is obvious that the Green Bull in front of him is slightly easier to deal with. At least judging from how tricky the fruit ability is, it does. What kind of expression is that? What you are facing now is a general of the Navy headquarters, you bastard. The Green Bull bent down slowly, and inserted his hands that had turned into tree roots into the ground. Buzzing. Violent shocks erupted from the deep underground. Huge trees tens of meters high opened up the soil, and firmly surrounded the small Mr. Three with a tendency to block out the sky and the sun. Forest of forbidden hate. The Green Bull let out a low cry. The huge tree shook and twisted, and turned into a superfist clenched with 5 fingers, and slammed down on Mr. Three. A frightening shadow loomed over him. Mr. Three's eyes shone red, and his sense of dominance was raised to the extreme. With the help of continuous pouring of candle liquid under his feet to reduce friction, he tossed and turned between the huge wooden fists at an extremely fast speed. Boom boom boom. Every time the huge wooden fist is swung down, it can cause the entire number 13 island of Chambord to tremble. Although Mr. Three was able to dodge the attack narrowly and narrowly every time, his retreat was compressed little by little under the deliberate guidance of the Green Bull, until it was unavoidable in the end. See where you can go next. With a wave of both arms of the Green Bull, 2 huge wooden fists pushed through the air, and landed with a bang. Looking at the ever-increasing giant fist in his field of vision, Mr. Three raised his foot and stomped heavily on the ground. The power of fruit awakening blossomed unreservedly, with him as the center, the root of avoiding the attack and escape before as the outline. The entire ground, together with the ground where the giant tree took root, were assimilated into flowing candles. If you can't run away, can't you disable your attack? The corners of Mr. Three's mouth raised slightly, and the raised arm quickly swung down. Whoosh. The candle sap that filled the jungle of giant trees poured out and spread in all directions. The candle sap went all the way up the trunk of the huge tree, and after completely covering the plants in the forest, it hardened instantly. The candle, which is far harder than steel, is like indestructible ice, completely blocking the Green Bull's forest of forbidden hate. The green environment is fleeting, and it is transformed into a gray and white dead era where everything is still and silent. Mr. Three is a move that combines the assimilation, precision, and hardness of fruit ability awakening, and uses it to the extreme, named Candle Demon Wax River Era. First it was Sokolsky, and now it's Kuzan. Are you eating wax fruit or imitation fruit? Seeing that all his attacks were blocked, the green cow didn't show much surprise or panic on his face. Instead he stretched out his finger and pointed at Mr. Three and complained. Standing under the shadow of the huge wooden fist, Mr. Three crossed his arms and said with a smile, I can use the moves they can use, and I can use the moves they can't use. Unfortunately, my lord, this is not something that can be done by imitating fruits. Hearing this, the Green Bull spat out in disdain. With sharp eyes, he saw through Mr. Three's fatigue hidden under the calm surface. Imitation is imitation after all. If they used these moves themselves, how could they be so tired and out of breath like you are now? Following his gaze, although the range is very small, the speed of Mr. 3's chest rising and falling is indeed faster than before. As expected of an admiral, this insight is really terrifying. Mr. 3 sighed heavily, indirectly affirming the judgment of the Green Bull. Ignoring his exclamation, the Green Bull slowly stretched out a finger. Also, there is one more thing you must know. Vigorous vitality is the most powerful force in this world. How could it be blocked by mere candles? Buzz. As soon as the green cow's voice fell, the supergiant trees that were surrounded by candles and fell silent suddenly burst into violent tremors. The incomparable growth energy surged out, the thick tree roots expanded rapidly, and cracks burst out of the strong candle. Although Mr. 3's solid candle has a hardness far exceeding that of steel, it is obvious that the plants produced by the green cow through the fruit ability are not comparable to ordinary plants. Finally, with a loud bang, the candles that blocked the entire forest were shattered and turned into gray-white wax shavings flying all over the sky. The forest of giant trees that had been freed from shackles became restless and crazy again. Surrounded by green leaves and vines, the huge wooden fist swung down towards Mr. 3 again. Candle wall. Mr. 3 no longer chose to be tough from the front, and raised his hand to create a giant candle wall to block his front. Boom 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 boom. The deafening bombardment connections continued to spread, and within a few seconds, the thick candle wall was smashed to pieces. Taking advantage of this gap, Mr. 3 gave birth to candle skates under his feet, moved quickly along the candle field, and hurriedly evacuated from the coverage of the forest of the Green Bull. This is the first time he has voluntarily withdrawn from his candle field in a battle. The strength of the Admiral of the Navy headquarters is evident. Leave aside your bold words and stop me. Wouldn't it be too late to escape now? Huh? The Green Bull in the center of the forest turned into a trent again, and was about to chase Mr. 3 in the direction where Mr. 3 was evacuated, but his powerful domineering aura suddenly captured a strong sense of danger. At the same time, Mr. 3 in the distance stopped. At his feet, a dark gray candle, lead, spread forward, connecting the huge jungle where the Green Bull was. My lord, I also have something to tell you here. Dark gray candle, but it will explode. Without giving the Green Bull too much time to react, Mr. 3 raised his hand and threw the flaming candle liquid towards the candle lead. Boom boom boom. The candle fuse with the blasting feature made a dense sound like firecrackers. Compared to firecrackers, the loud noise was deafening. The speed of the explosion was extremely fast, reaching the Green Bull's forest of forbidden hate almost instantly, and then completely ignite and detonate the candle field mixed inside. In an instant, the flames shot into the sky, and thick smoke billowed. Amidst the horrified expression and screams of the Green Bull, the entire forest was engulfed by endless flames and heat waves. At this moment, on the tallest building on the streets of the town in the distance, stood several figures of different heights and physiques. The Green Bull who killed us in seconds was forced into such a situation. Is this Mr. Candle Demon, the Chief of Staff of the Cross Union, with a bounty of 1.5 billion? I thought I was only one step away from the world, but I didn't expect the gap to be so big. It's because you are too arrogant. The 4 emperors and generals are all as strong as monsters. How can it be that we can contend against it? The one who is fighting the Green Bull now is only Mr. 3, who is famous for his brains in the Cross Union, and the cadres at his level, and even Buggy above him. How terrifying is that? Lars Adama, it is said that your goal in the new world is the Cross Union. How is it? How do you feel now? This group of people standing here watching the battle are none other than the supernova captains who were previously arrested by the Green Bull. Without the shackles of the Green Bulls, with their abilities, it is not easy to escape from the ordinary navy of the Chambord Islands. After seeing the horror of the general, they dare to gather here to watch the battle. I have to say that these supernovas are really brave. Hello? Superglue, talking to you. The supernovas noticed that something was wrong with Lars Adama. At this time, Lars Adama had a bandage on his head, and his eyes were fixed on Mr. 3 in the distance. Although they were far away, but with good eyesight, he recognized this person at a glance. He was one of the 3 strangely dressed weirdos that he met in the casino to deal with the fake illegitimate child. Damn, I didn't expect that I was so close to them. The more Lars Adama thought about it, the more startled he became. Now that Mr. 3, the Candle Demon strategist of the Crusaders, appeared here, the black-nosed man walking side by side as his ultimate goal, the president of the Crusades, Buggy the Clown. He never thought that his declaration of challenge would be passed on to the other party in this form. What was even more unexpected was that people didn't put him in their eyes at all, and they didn't even bother to care about him. In contrast, among all the supernovas, only Hanamira, the scythe of death and evil, who knew the existence of Buggy and others in advance, behaved a little calmer. Let's talk about this kind of thing later. Don't you guys want to go at this perfect time when Mr. 3 holds the green bull? Her words immediately won the approval of most people. Indeed, now is a good time to set sail. Hee, the cross-trade union really owes them a big favor. Miss Mira is indeed super understanding. If there is a chance, can you let me measure your measurements with both hands? Hearing this, Hannah Mira, who was wearing a skull mask, pulled out the giant scythe behind her backhand, and her cold voice exuded murderous intent. Evican Coxings, if you say this again, I will kill you. It's scary, slip away. Seeing this, Yevican Coxings, the supernova endless engine, turned around immediately and was the first to leave here. The other supernovas followed closely and returned to the coded pirate ship with their respective crew members. In the aftermath of the battle between Mr. 3 and the Green Bull, they quietly sneaked into the bottom of the sea and set off for Murloc Island. On the other side, in the ruins of the forest that had been burned to ashes by the flames of the candles, a bud germinates in the coke, grows and evolves rapidly, and emerges from it as a green cow rejuvenated by energy. It's really as insidious and cunning as the rumors say. Mr. 3, did you pretend to show me your fatigue just now? Regarding the rebirth of the Green Bull, although Mr. 3 was surprised, it was not unexpected. If the Admiral is so easy to solve, how can he be called the highest combat power of the Navy headquarters? Aren't you the same, pretending to scream, but there's nothing wrong with it? Mr. 3 spread out his hands, his eyes under the goggles were full of fighting spirit, and he hooked his fingers at the Green Bull. Come on, General, let's continue fighting. Boom boom boom. The green and white torrents clashed fiercely, like two island-sized monsters fighting crazily. In the fierce battle between Mr. 3 and the Green Bull, the topography of nearly half of the 13th island of Chambord was completely changed. Green Bull knows that there is the existence of Hades Rayleigh here. In order to avoid involving this legendary pirate and putting himself in an extremely disadvantageous situation, he consciously extends the battle area to other surrounding islands. Compared to other admirals of the Navy, he is quite arrogant, but not stupid. Of course Mr. 3 noticed his thoughts, but he chose to cooperate very tacitly. He also wanted to let Rayleigh see the potential of the cross-union through this battle. In this way, the two parties who have reached the same goal continue to move forward on the battlefield. Hit from Island 13 to Island 14 in the Shampoo Islands, and then from Island 14 to Islands 15 and 16. As the illegal area of the Chambord Islands, there are a large number of pirates, human traffickers, and murderers lurking here. Hearing the movement, these ferocious people who usually do all kinds of evils picked up their guys one after another and rushed outside, wanting to teach some lessons to those guys who dared to break Shampoo's unspoken rules. But when they looked up aggressively and saw the huge forest trees and candle waves that filled their field of vision and covered even the sky, they were stunned and dumbfounded for a moment. What's happening here? Is it the end of the world? That cloak is Admiral Green Bull, someone exclaimed. Isn't he fighting against Mr. 3, the Chief of Staff of the Crusaders Union who has been in the limelight recently, Candle Demon Army Master? Some people also recognized Mr. 3. Could it be that the news just now is true, that Buggy, the clown of the Four Emperors, attacked the Tianlong people? Of course, when the smarter guy realized that the situation was not good, he had already slipped away and left the small island that had been entrenched for a long time at an extremely fast speed. What an international joke. How can little people like them have the qualifications to watch battles at the level of admirals? Isn't this pure courting death? Just as these self-aware smart people thought, the confrontation between the Infinite Forest and the White Candle domains soon spread to the entire island. Those villains who were too late to escape were crushed on the spot by the aftermath of the battle without any surprises. And these two adjacent lawless areas are the final battlefield for the duel between Mr. 3 and the Green Bull. Green Bull, I'm sorry, I don't have that much time to spend here with you. Mr. 3 stood on island number 15, which was assimilated into a sea of candles by the fruit power. His whole body was covered with candle armor in dilapidated condition. Even one of the goggle lenses on the bridge of his nose was broken, and wax shavings flew around. He slowly raised his right arm, and the restless dark gray candle ocean under his feet seemed to be drawn by some kind of force, frantically gathering in the air, and condensing into a giant sphere comparable to a small island. Full power great flame ring. As Mr. 3's gentle voice fell, the green cow's pupils shrank suddenly. Standing on Island 16 that had turned into an infinite forest, he showed the shock from the heart for the first time. Although the green cow is wearing black sunglasses at this time, it still can't block the dazzling light that is gradually brightening, scorching, and manic in front of him. In front of him, a small sun that was compressed to the extreme was slowly rising from the sea of candles. The dripping candlelight instantly ignited the entire island. Mr. 3 stood on the heat wave of the sea of fire, bathed in the endless flames, held the flame in his hand, and looked into the distance, like a real candle demon from hell. What a crazy guy. Do you want to destroy this Chambord Islands? The green bull was really taken aback by this momentum, and the cloak of justice behind him danced wildly. He no longer held back his hand, and pushed his fruitability and arrogance to the extreme. Forbidden forest. Boom. The already lush giant forest expanded again, and the trees and vines grew wildly as if they had broken through the restrictions of plants, intertwined, and finally gathered into a bowl of wood that was taller than the mangrove tree. The shadows that cover the sky and the sun are cast down. If there is no candlelight from Mr. 3, the surrounding islands will be shrouded in darkness. After this blow, the majesty of the Admiral will no longer exist. If you can do it, then try it, Mr. 3. Mr. 3 and the Green Bull, who completed the ultimate move at the same time, stopped procrastinating, and controlled the small Liang and the dark Green Bull to bombard together. Boom. In an instant, the earth trembled, the mountains shook, and the sea trembled. An unimaginably huge shockwave erupted, raging in all directions, sweeping and devouring everything around like a brutal beast. When the impact dissipated in the residents of the surrounding islands, pirates and navy looked around in fear. They saw that the islands number 15 and number 16 of the Chambord archipelago had been torn apart, annihilated in the crazy influx of seawater, and ceased to exist. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Mr. 3 knelt on one knee on a candle plane floating on the sea, his chest rose and fell violently, and he kept panting heavily. He didn't have any reservations about the great flame ring just now, and he poured almost all his strength into it, which naturally and inevitably showed fatigue. That Green Bull, how's it going? Ignoring his scarred body, Mr. 3 struggled to look up, trying to find the Green Bull on the empty sea level. Although he is very confident in the power of his ultimate move, the opponent is the highest combat power of the Navy headquarters after all, and he was promoted from the world conscription, the strongest of the strong. If it is so easy to solve, then the Green Bull is really a shame of the general. According to Mr. 3's estimation, the move just now could at most only inflict damage to the Green Bull that cannot be ignored. Puff. While Mr. 3 was searching for the green cow, a dark green vampire vine suddenly emerged from the calm water. The blood-sucking vine struck at lightning speed, and after entwining him tightly, the spikes at the end lifted high and pierced into his chest fiercely. Mr. 3, I admit that your current destructive power and arrogance are already at the level of a general. A sea lotus with a unique shape emerged from the gentle water, and as the petals bloomed little by little, the figure of the green cow appeared in Mr. 3's field of vision. At this time, the Green Bull's forehead was bleeding, and the cloak of justice on his body was in tatters, revealing his skin that had become red after being burned by the flames. He was indeed injured in the confrontation just now, but his steady breathing represented his current state, which was much higher than that of Mr. 3. What's more, the current Mr. 3 was successfully attacked by him, like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Unfortunately, compared to the general, your physical strength is simply unsightly. The lenses of the Green Bull's sunglasses were shattered by the impact just now, and the exposed eyes revealed endless killing intent. For the villain in front of him who dared to offend the Tianlong people, he would not have the slightest scruples or pity. Even if the cross-trade union will provoke crazy revenge in the future, he will punish it here. That's it. Turn it into rich nourishment and become a part of my body, Mr. 3. The Green Bull drank heavily, clenched his fist with his raised palm. Sizzle. The thick vines erupted with terrifying force, directly piercing through Mr. 3's chest, sucking his flesh and blood frantically. In the blink of an eye, Mr. 3 was sucked into a shriveled corpse and fell along the smooth candle plane. With a plop, it sank into the deep seabed. The Crusaders' Candle Demon Army Division, Galdino, Pawn. Somewhere in the sea not far from the Chambord Islands, a small sailboat disguised as a merchant ship slowly sailed towards the nearest cross-union stronghold under the sea breeze. I am the supreme celestial dragon in this world. If you are sensible, send me back to Marie Joya right now, or you, your relatives and friends, will all die without a place to die. After being treated by the ship's doctor, Charos, who was half paralyzed by the buggy bomb, has regained consciousness and is lying angrily in a dark corner of the cabin, threatening continuously. As expected of a brain defect who is used to supreme power, under such circumstances, he still wants to use the so-called Dragon Man status to show off his might. In front of him, there were Buggy and Hancock in big red robes, and behind them stood a group of younger brothers with bounties of over 100 million. Facing the extremely arrogant threat of Charos, Hancock, who had been a slave to this group of beasts, couldn't bear it first, stood up with a gloomy face, and walked slowly to Charos. "You. What are you going to do? I'm a celestial dragon. Even the admiral of the navy has to be obedient to the celestial dragon." Ah. Before Charlos could finish his sentence, the severe pain occupied all his thoughts, causing him to keep screaming sharply. As the blood splashed out, a bloody arm spun a few times in midair and then landed beside the pale-faced Charles Rose with a boom. "That's his right arm. Tinlongren, just hearing these 3 words makes me unable to restrain the urge to kick your head off." Hancock's eyes radiated a coldness that had never been seen before. Even because she couldn't restrain her extreme anger, her whole body was trembling slightly. Having come out of the previous shadow, she is no longer afraid of Tianlong people, only pure killing intent remains. You. Please, don't kill me. Please don't kill me. I can give you all rights, status, and money. As long as you don't kill me, I can satisfy you no matter what you want." Charos, who had never suffered before, immediately lost his momentum, thumping his legs and backing away, trembling. A puddle of pungent-smelling liquid flowed out from under him, mixed with bright red blood, making one feel very sick. "All right, Hancock. According to what Mr. 3 said, this guy is still very useful to keep, and if he continues to torture like this, he won't be able to die if he dies." Buggy, who was sitting on the main seat, laughed, and the clown makeup on his face looked extremely permeable against the dark light. Hearing that, as if he had been redeemed, Charlos bypassed Hancock and quickly crawled towards Buggy. However, Buggy's next words completely paralyzed him, who finally saw hope. "You are still young, and you can't grasp the degree of torture, so let me do it." Buggy took out several small knives from the Dahongpao and put them near his mouth, stretched out his nimble tongue, and licked the gleaming blades. These small knives are covered with a poison that makes people desperate to survive. If you touch them a little, it will. Huh? Realizing that something was wrong, Buggy froze suddenly, his fierce eyes widened. The brutal atmosphere was instantly awkward. "President Buggy, you." The little brother behind him blinked, his mind spinning rapidly. As ardent fans of President Buggy, they desperately wanted to understand the true purpose of this confusing action. That's right, they didn't think that the great President Buggy would make such an idiot-like low-level mistake at all. Could it be that there is no poison on the knife? President Buggy, you want to disintegrate Tinlongren psychologically and let him feel the real despair? A simple sentence made the Tianlong people suffer from repeated torments. "As expected of you, President Buggy, President Buggy, President Buggy." Amid the passionate shouts of the younger brothers, Buggy forced himself to show a bright smile. "I really can't do anything about you. Even this kind of intention has been noticed." After he sighed, he calmly stood up from his seat, and solemnly confessed to the younger brothers behind him, "My goal has been achieved, and I will leave the rest to you. Remember, give this guy a sigh of relief." After finishing speaking, Buggy shook off the big red robe on his body, and under the admiring eyes of many younger brothers, with his hands behind his back, he walked leisurely out of the dark room where the Tinlongren were imprisoned. After walking through the long corridor, I finally came to the deck with a wide view. Whoosh whoosh. After confirming that the younger brothers did not follow, the calmness on Buggy's face was instantly replaced by panic. Sweating profusely, he took out a few jet black pills from the pirate hat and stuffed them into his mouth at a speed beyond the limit. The cool and comfortable feeling flows down the throat and spreads all over the body, dispelling the increasingly hot nerves. "Huh, I'm saved." Buggy heaved a sigh of relief. He swore that he would never get carried away with complacency again. "Buggy, what are you doing?" A calm and steady voice came from the second deck. Buggy was so frightened that his painting style changed suddenly. "Huh?" After looking closely, he found that the person who came was Mr. 3, and his painting style returned to normal. I was shocked, it turned out to be you 3. "Why? Can't I scare you?" Mr. 3 frowned slightly, very puzzled by this guy's abnormal behavior. No. Buggy shook his head again and again, and he was stunned for a few seconds before calming down. "Wait, you have withdrawn from that state of concentration, that is to say." Hearing this, Mr. 3, with a steady breath, raised his head and looked towards the end of the vast sea. Indistinctly, you can still see the outline of some Chambord islands. That's right, my candle clone was completely killed by the Green Bull, he sighed softly. After all, it is the highest combat power of the Navy headquarters. The performance of the Green Bull may not be as amazing as the veteran generals, but both the fruit ability and domineering are extremely powerful and should not be underestimated. As for the so-called candle clone, it is a new move he developed in Teacher Kaido's domineering lecture hall by using the bug that can be used indefinitely in the Eternal Wax Museum. The general principle is to extract the wax figure of the Eternal Wax Museum and attach it to the clone made of candles, so that it has 80% of the body's peak combat power. There is no doubt that the development of this kind of moves based on system props is quite difficult. If you can't use the Eternal Wax Museum unlimitedly, and only rely on the once-a-week cooling time, it is impossible for Mr. 3 to develop successfully after trying to get old. So, domineering lecture hall is really a heaven-defying reward. The advantage of the candle avatar is obvious, like this time against the Green Bull, it can replace the main body to take risks. Because it is a creation of the system, even if you use domineering, you can't tell the truth from the fake. Of course, if the knowledge color is so domineering that he can foresee the distant future after the candle clone is eliminated, then that's another matter. As for the shortcomings, they are also obvious. The candle avatar does not have the recovery ability and endurance of the main body, and GG must be declared when 80% of the peak state is used up. And Mr. 3 will lose the chance to do a sit-up to save his life, and he needs to wait for 7 days to cool down. All in all, this is a unique trick that can produce unexpected effects in special scenarios. Soon, Hancock, who was wearing a sexy cheongsam with a 9 snakes totem, also came out of the cabin. After seeing Mr. 3 who was with Buggy on the deck, she walked forward with long legs, and pointed a heavy hand knife at Mr. 3's head. My concubine is still worried about your safety, Mr. 3, I didn't expect you to play well? Recalling that when he faced the Green Bull in the Chambord Islands, he solemnly said the phrase, "You must survive," Hancock's alluring face immediately showed a demonic and terrifying viciousness. Color. As the famous pirate empress, she was tricked by this bastard man in front of her. In just the next second, the arrogance on the face of the current emperor of Amazon Lily was replaced by undisguised emotion. Thank you, and Buggy, really thank you guys. Hancock withdrew the knife in his hand, pursed his lips, and faint tears flowed deep in his beautiful blue eyes. Whether it is facing the deepest fear in the heart at the auction, or Buggy decisively bombarding the Celestial Dragon, or Mr. 3's design to capture the Celestial Dragon alive, he will not hesitate to clash with the Admiral. All the things that happened today will be engraved in her heart, and she will never forget them for life. This is the day she gets redemption in a new life. Mr. 3 raised his hand and touched the red envelope that popped out of his head. Although Hancock's gratitude can be clearly felt, why is Lao Su the one who got beaten? Ahahaha, don't worship me too much, after all, our ultimate goal is to overthrow the rule of the Tianlong people. Buggy, who survived the disaster, laughed. Obviously this guy made up his mind just now, so he won't get carried away anymore. This appearance of being cheap and being obedient instantly aroused Mr. 3's eyes. But I have to admit that Buggy's domineering luck is really exaggerated. If this guy hadn't bombarded the Celestial Dragons by mistake, Hancock, who had doubts in his heart, would never have opened up to them completely like he is now, revealing his true emotions hidden under his arrogance. What's more, he also couldn't think of a strategy to pin the big pot of Tinlongren on Blackbeard. It can be said that Buggy's erroneous operation not only completely subdued Hancock, but also has a great chance to dissolve the current tense situation of the Cross Guild facing the enemy. But having said that, in this sensitive period, is it really okay to attack or even kidnap a Celestial Dragon? Hancock couldn't help asking. Now she has completely agreed with Buggy and Mr. 3, and regards the Cross Union as her belonging. Naturally, there is concern about the repercussions of their doing so. Although I don't want to admit it, the consequences of attacking the world's noble Tianlong people are indeed terrible. Don't worry, as I said in Chambord Islands, we just need to pour this basin of dirty water on Blackbeard. Mr. 3 showed the same confidence as before. That bastard Blackbeard is suspicious by nature. 3. Are you absolutely sure that you can fool him? Buggy restrained the complacency on his face and said worriedly. As he had fought against Blackbeard decades ago, he knew very well how shrewd the other party was. If they don't handle it well, not only will they be chased by the Navy, but they will also provoke crazy revenge from Blackbeard. There is nothing in the world that can be achieved without taking risks, let alone the scheming 4 emperors in the Navy. Mr. 3 shrugged, seeing Buggy's concerns. There is absolutely no certainty, but Lukey, yes, there are still. With the overall view of the pirate world, he is far superior to everyone in controlling the weaknesses of the characters of various forces. What exactly do we need to do? Buggy asked curiously from his heart. Hancock followed with a curious and expectant look. She, who has always been convincing people with her legs, suddenly found that she liked this kind of wit fight more and more, using her brain to trick the enemy around. The specific details need to be planned after we return to Kale Bali, but it can be summed up in one word. Mr. 3 adjusted his sexy three-letter hairstyle, slightly raised the corners of his mouth, and said in a somewhat mysterious tone, that is, 3 counts. Switch the beam. Another miraculous 36 tricks? For some reason, when they heard this familiar word, Buggy and Hancock's worries suddenly dissipated a lot. They are the first group of people who have seen how terrifying the 36 tricks are. The reason why the Buggy pirates were able to grow from nothing at the beginning to the huge scale of the 4 Emperors Cross Guild now, the role played by the 36 strategies is irreplaceable. Mr. 3 roughly explained to the two the implementation ideas and operations of this trick. After listening to it, Buggy was greatly shocked, and said with longing, 3, what kind of monsters are there in your hometown, to be able to write such a terrifying collection of strategies? To be honest, my mind is in front of them, not much different from a 3-year-old child. Mr. 3 replied modestly. This is not some invisible coercion. Compared with those ancient men with great wisdom, he is indeed insignificant. Hancock rested his delicate chin with one hand, frowned slightly, and carefully analyzed Mr. 3's strategy just now. If this is the case, maybe the crime of attacking and kidnapping the Tianlong people can really be placed on the Blackbeard pirates. You said just now that you were only 50 to 60% sure. Are you being too conservative? Mr. 3 spread his hands, scratched his head and smiled lightly. After all, the opponents this time are the 4 emperors in the navy, so we must add some risks beyond our expectations, right? As expected of you. Hancock was convinced. I can't wait to see it. After seeing the celestial dragon, Blackbeard's expression looks like he has eaten shit. Buggy let out a sinister smile. As if he couldn't restrain the excitement in his heart, he stood where he was gearing up, and his originally sluggish aura became much sharper. Besides, I don't know if it's because I beat up the Tinlongren. I feel fearless now, full of strength. Buggy sighed in both doubt and surprise. Speaking of which, the concubine does have a similar feeling. Hancock bit his fingernails lightly, and said slowly. Of course, compared to the small changes in her body, the changes in her mental will are more obvious when she overcomes her fear of the Tianlong people in her heart. Mr. 3 glanced at the two of them, and joked with a smile. Could it be that there is such a hidden benefit in beating the Tianlong people violently? What a ghost. Just now, a long-lost system prompt came from the back of his mind. Congratulations for triggering the special event, bombarding the Tinlongren, as the existence of the source of evil in the pirate world. Tinlongren can be punished by everyone. Doing things that the world dare not do is not only a manifestation of courage, but also the result of righteousness. Relevant personnel receive special event rewards. Buggy. Trigger. Executor. Physical fitness increased by 5%, fruit development progress increased by 9%, domineering cultivation progress increased by 6%. Mr. 3. Planner. Promoter. Physical fitness increased by 7%, fruit breakthrough progress increased by 6%, domineering cultivation progress increased by 6%. Hancock. Executor. Broken arm. Physical fitness increased by 5%, the total progress of fruit development increased by 5%, and the progress of domineering cultivation increased by 5%. If this is the case, then I will have to become a Tianlong hunter. Buggy stuck out his tongue and licked his lips, his eyes suddenly became fierce. If you look closely, it's not difficult to find that the corner of this guy's mouth is smiling. Obviously he's talking high again. After all, similar subtle changes had happened several times before, and since it was not particularly obvious, he habitually thought it was his own illusion. How can there be any reason in the world to become stronger for no reason? Then turn around now and put you down in the Holy Land Marie Joya, where there are more celestial dragons. Mr. 3 nodded and suggested earnestly. Huh. Don't. Buggy just wanted to confess, but when he looked up, he saw Mr. 3 who was holding back his laughter. He immediately became angry and breathed out fragrantly, Damn Galdino, how dare you fucking play me? Seeing his appearance, Mr. 3 laughed loudly. Ha ha ha, don't you call yourself a dragon hunter? Even Hancock, who has always been indifferent, couldn't help chuckling. After overcoming the fear in her heart, in front of the two partners, who dared to attack the Tianlong people, her expression of emotion became more authentic and casual. While the three were chatting, the small merchant ship pushed away from the calm sea and speeded up to the nearest cross-union stronghold. At this time, the Chambord Islands, the naval station. This is roughly what happened. They kidnapped the celestial dragon, Saint Charos. It seems that there is some kind of deal with Blackbeard. The green cow with a few bandages wrapped around his face sat on the sofa with his legs crossed, and the phone bug in his hand imitated the angry expression of the red dog over there. Cross-union, it's cross-union again. In the Admiral's office of the Navy headquarters, Akainu, who was finally able to drink tea leisurely, slapped the desk, and the cigar biting in his mouth was burned to ashes by the high temperature of the magma. He really didn't expect that just a few days after the incident in the City of Advancement, Buggy and the gang of damned guys would come up with such unprecedented crazy behavior again. Obviously the Navy and the world government have chosen to turn a blind eye to the matter of them snatching Doflamingo. In fact, compared to the degree of danger of advancing the city, Akainu didn't feel much about Charos being attacked and kidnapped. He just wants to enforce absolute justice and punish evil at any cost, and it doesn't matter what happens to Charlos. However, the identity of Charos Tianlong is there, making this matter doomed to be difficult to calm down. Blue blue blue. Sure enough, in the corner of the office, the contact phone exclusively for Wu Laoxing rang. Although Akainu felt a headache, he still answered the phone helplessly. Two slender black beards grew immediately on the phone bug's face, and a resin bubble appeared vividly on its head. Sakaski. Hurry up and save my son. Even if all the three generals are sent out, we must definitely destroy the damned crusaders and save my precious son. On the other end of the phone, Roswald San, the celestial dragon, yelled at the red dog, without any consideration for the face of the Admiral of the Navy. The gloomy-faced Akainu recognized the other party, and explained with a suppressed temper. San Roswald, the three generals are the highest combat power of the Navy headquarters, and there are quite important things to be responsible for, and rashly mobilizing them will have too much impact. Besides, it's not so easy to gather many Shichibukai's cross-unions. Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by the irritable Roswald. I don't care if you influence or not. Listen to Sakaski. Save my precious son from the damn pirates, that's what you need to do now. After being shouted like this, Akainu's face became more and more gloomy. What do you mean by that? At this moment, someone from the 5 Old Stars answered the phone bug. Sakaski, I understand your concerns, but the dignity and sanctity of the Tianlong people as the nobles of the world are inviolable. Anyone who wants to take action against the descendants of the Creator should be punished most severely. What the Revolutionary Army did in Marie Joa has shaken the status of the world government and the celestial dragons. At this juncture, we will not allow anyone else to do something similar. Can you understand? 5 Elders' tone was much softer than Roswald's, but the invisible pressure contained in it was infinitely stronger than Roswald's. As they said, the majesty of the Tianlong people is absolutely inviolable. Feeling the oppression from the 5 Old Stars' orders, the corners of Akainu's mouth twitched, his teeth were clenched, and white smoke uncontrollably emitted from his head wearing the marshal's peaked cap. That was the ability of the magma fruit. In this chaotic period, the military strength is already seriously lacking. How could it be possible to mobilize 3 generals to start operations just because of a mere Charos? Akainu really wanted to reply in this way, but after thinking about it several times, he finally gave up on this unacceptable proposal. I understand. He sighed heavily and chose to compromise. After hanging up the phone of 5 Elder, he said to the Green Cow, Green Bull, have you heard it? Go back to the Navy headquarters first. It will not be easy to recapture St. Charles Rose from the Cross-Union and Blackbeard. Long discussion. Understood. The Green Bull did not refuse, of course. Now he is very upset and can't wait to tear Mr. 3 himself into pieces. As the price for letting him suck a stomach full of indigestible wax oil. Puff. Just when Akainu hid in the chair and had a headache, there was an uncontrollable smirk from outside the office. I saw the white-haired Sen Guo crouching by the door. His eyes narrowed slightly on half of his protruding head, and a gloating smile was written all over it. They are already retired old men, so don't keep running this way if you have nothing to do. Akakan said in a muffled voice without raising his head. With his knowledge, he had already noticed the arrival of the Warring States period. Ha ha ha, Sakarsky, now you know how difficult it is to be a marshal? Seeing that he was discovered, Zhang Guo no longer hid, but opened the door of the office openly and walked in. 2 years ago, he also encountered a major incident in which the Tianlong people were attacked by the Straw Hat Luffy. But the nature at that time was far different from what it is now. Straw Hat Luffy just ran away after beating the Celestial Dragon, and he still had his grandfather who was a naval hero in his pocket. The kidnapping of the Tianlong people by the Cross Union not only has a very clear purpose and an extremely arrogant approach, but there is also the shadow of Blackbeard behind it. They are completely in a posture that they want to fight against the Tianlong people. It's not enough to make me shrink back to this extent. Akaken's eyes were extremely firm. Seeing his appearance, Zhang Guo grabbed the senbei in his hand and put it in his mouth. Although it is not suitable for him to ask about the affairs of the Navy headquarters, after a few hesitation, he still couldn't help asking. Do you really want to summon the 3 generals to have a conflict with those 2 forces? Akainu raised his head and glanced at Sengoku, and said bluntly, the Tianlong people have the right to mobilize the admiral, and even the marshal cannot refuse. You should know this better than me. However, I can't guarantee whether I can take back Charos. After all, they are too formidable for emperors. Hearing this, Sengoku could not help laughing out loud even though he understood Akakenu's true inner thoughts. I never thought you would learn what Paluzolino did. What responded to him was Akainu's cold and ruthless words. The highest combat power of the Navy headquarters shouldn't be serving such insignificant things. Kale Bali, the meeting room of the base camp. A dozen or so pirates of different sizes and clothes stood on both sides of the conference room, exuding a ferocious aura. Just standing there was enough to make people feel terrified, and they couldn't help but feel like retreating. If any bounty hunters came here, they would definitely be shocked. Because these are all great pirates with bounties exceeding 500 million. In the center of this group of vicious pirates is a beautifully crafted circular conference table. Several calm figures sit with their legs crossed. Their legs crossed, or their arms spread, sitting in completely different postures. Superior. Even the great pirates, who have seen strong winds and waves and a bounty of more than 100 million, couldn't help swallowing when they saw the luxurious lineup in front of them, and a little cold sweat oozes from their foreheads. Edward Weevil, Don Quixote Doflamingo, Crocodile, Boya Hancock, Dracule Mihawk, Buggy the Clown, plus Mr. 3 Garrett who has a bounty of 1.5 billion promise. This is a terrifying lineup of 5 Shichibukai and 2 4 emperors. An atmosphere that was so depressing that it was extremely difficult to breathe lingered in the hearts of this group of pirates. Everyone was looking forward to what would happen in this emergency meeting called by the Chief of Staff Mr. 3. Thank you very much for coming here in response to the call. Everyone is familiar with each other, so I won't talk nonsense. Look at what treasures we have brought to everyone during our trip to the Chambord Islands. Mr. 3 sat on his seat with Erlang's legs crossed, raised his arms and clapped his hands under the surprised eyes of Crocodile and others. Crunch. The door of the conference room was pushed open, and Ayasha, who was dressed in black and sassy attire, walked out slowly. After coming in front of everyone, she pulled up the hemp rope in her hand and slammed it forward. Amidst the terrified and trembling screams, a heavily tied voice flew out from behind and fell heavily on the solid floor. It was the broken-armed celestial dragon with a bruised nose and swollen face, Charos. This guy is God, the Roswald family of the celestial dragon, Charles Rose? Doflamingo, who rested his legs on the conference table leisurely, was so frightened that he almost fell off the chair. As the pirate who had the deepest contact with Marie Joya, he quickly recognized his identity from the broken celestial dragon uniform of Charos. A stone stirred up thousands of waves, and the people who were still wondering who this person was in front of them a second ago stopped breathing and their eyes widened. Tinlongren? You kidnapped a Tinlongren in the Chambord Islands? Crocodile didn't even have time to smoke the cigar he was biting, and looked at Mr. 3 in disbelief. He knew very well how serious the consequences would be if he touched the world's aristocratic Tianlong people during this sensitive period, so he wanted to get an accurate answer from Mr. 3. Doflamingo is right. This guy is indeed the celestial dragon man Charos. Mr. 3 spread out his hands and made a helpless expression. I didn't want to do anything at first, but who made him stare at our President Buggy in the crowd? So, President Buggy used special shells to blow up this guy into this look. Hearing this, Charlos, who was paralyzed on the ground with his mouth tightly covered, immediately struggled violently. When did I stare at you? I was just riding a mermaid outside to play in peace. When did I stare at you? The dull man roared crazily in his heart, and he still naively thought that as long as he could explain, he would be able to solve that misunderstanding, and let the other party let him go back. Just glared at President Buggy. Even the Tianlong people, can't they be spared? Ah. This damn courage, facing the Tinlongren who can mobilize the admiral, President Buggy has no fear. This is the super crew member, Rumor, most valued by Pirate King Roger, who yelled at the four emperors' red hair face to face without even the slightest bit of temper. Buggy God. What kind of descendants of gods descended from Tianlong people? President Buggy, you are our god. The big pirates with a bounty of more than 100 million were so shocked that they couldn't help shouting the name of Buggy the Clown. No wonder they are as crazy as the other younger brothers. Just attacking and kidnapping a Tinlongren head-on is too shocking and unheard of. Mr. 3 pushed the goggles, raised his head and gave Buggy a look. Buggy understood immediately, and shouted to stop the frenzied shouting of the pirates. This celestial dragon is of great value to us, and the Navy and the world government will definitely not let it go. So I declare that from now on, the Cross Trade Union will be on the highest alert, and no ships will be allowed to enter the waters of Kale Bali. Anyone who trespasses will be sunk on the spot. The extremely arrogant remarks instantly ushered in the cheers and fanaticism of the big pirates. If any one of them is taken out alone, they can make a little fame in the New World, and they are vicious and desperados themselves. Hearing Buggy's domineering speech now, he was naturally very excited on the surface, it was true. As for what the truest thoughts in their hearts are, it is unknown. After the announcement, Buggy let the group of powerful pirates leave the meeting room on the grounds that he was fully prepared to obey the dispatch, and did not intend to tell them about the arrangement to deceive Blackbeard. The reason why such a process is to be carried out is to further test their loyalty to the Cross Union through the kidnapping of the celestial dragon man Charos. After all, this group of people will become an indispensable backbone of the Cross Trade Union in the future, and no mistakes are allowed. If you are simply afraid of the Tianlong people, it is okay to say, if the spies of the world government and the running dogs of the Tianlong people are mixed in, the possible harm will be unimaginable. It wasn't until the door of the conference room was closed again that Mr. 3 turned around and looked at Ayasha, who was not far away. Ayasha nodded slightly, expressing to the third brother that she had noted down the few people who exuded malice just now. Because Miss Ba Jin, an outsider, was present at the scene, she was smart and didn't make a sound, so as not to expose her fruitability. So, let's talk about it now. What is the real purpose of kidnapping this celestial dragon? Crocodile broke the silence first. During the time spent with Mr. 3, he has fully accepted the astonishing changes of this former subordinate, or it can be said that he has endured the true courage for many years. Therefore, he didn't believe at all that the three of Mr. 3 really shot at the nobles of the world because of some shit. Let me listen to it carefully. What kind of benefits are it that allows you to do such crazy things? Compared with Crocodile's doubts, Doflamingo's tone was a little more fearful. He knows the horror of Tianlong people. Under this kind of fear, there is an uncontrollable excitement and madness buried. This incident is destined to cause an uproar all over the world, and he, Doflamingo, finally doesn't have to squat in prison and stare at the newspapers. Kidnapping Tianlong people, you guys, you have really done a great thing. Even Hawkeye, who was always calm and indifferent, cast quite curious eyes on Mr. 3. He really wanted to know what kind of plans and calculations this man with a super IQ had this time. As a matter of course, Buggy, a simple-minded guy, was definitely not the mastermind of this incident, and was subconsciously ignored by him. If Buggy knew what Hawkeye was thinking at this time, he would probably have to turn on the mouthpiece mode again and prove himself by spouting wildly. Under everyone's curious gaze, Mr. 3, who had already been thinking in his heart, coughed lightly, and slowly said how to divert the disaster to the east, and at the same time put the cauldron of kidnapping the Tinlongren on Blackbeard, and at the same time put Moria the plan of escape the shell of the golden cicada, was obtained. After all, the audience fell into silence. Seeing the shocked expressions on the faces of these powerhouses who roamed the New World, Mr. 3 nodded in satisfaction. Then, the first step of this strategy is, call Morgans at Le Monde. Through encrypted phone bugs, Mr. 3 quickly got in touch with Morgans of the World Economic News. Mr. 3, I was just about to call you, but I heard that your Crusaders have done another earth-shattering event this time. The phone bug imitated Morgan's incomparably sharp eyes. As the largest news agency in the pirate world, he naturally has his own channels and can know about the attack on the Chambord Islands and the kidnapping of the Tianlong people as soon as possible. With Mr. 3 clones fighting against the Green Cow wild animal husbandry, it is quite difficult to be unobtrusive. Sure enough, you already know. Mr. 3 was not surprised by this, and said directly, in this case, I don't need to explain too much. You can get any photos you need from us. In exchange, I want to see related reports in tomorrow's newspaper. For the same reason, the power of public opinion, especially journalism, is very important in any world. The last Advanced City incident was complicated by Blackbeard's intervention, and Mr. 3 politely declined Morgan's confirmation. And now, he just needs the events of the Tianlong people to ferment around the world and spread to Blackbeard's ears as soon as possible. Taking the initiative to contact Morgans can not only achieve this goal, but also sell a favor to Morgans. One stone two bird. Morgans, simulated by the phone bug, lowered his head in silence for a few seconds, and then flashed his signature sinister smile. Hee hee, it looks like you are playing a big game of chess. Although he didn't know the real purpose of the Cross Guild kidnapping the Tianlong people, Morgans quickly guessed that the Cross Guild must have a plan. Knowing the rules of the pirate world well, he is very knowledgeable and does not get to the bottom of it. Anyway, he began to look forward to the breaking news in the near future when the truth surfaced. Okay, I accept your favor. But before that, my principle is to ensure the authenticity of the news. Some exaggerations are okay, but if the content of the news is excessively modified, please forgive me for not cooperating. A principled and professional journalist, Morgans has a tough stance. Of course, we only provide the photos you need, and the rest of the content should follow the rules of your newspaper, and there is no need to exaggerate it. Mr. 3 laughed. The cauldron of attacking and kidnapping the Tianlong people is ultimately going to be on Blackbeard. Exaggerating its influence, wouldn't it be cheap for him? Interesting. My subordinates will get in touch with you later. I'll ask you for photos and intelligence. After a pause, Morgans looked excited and laughed. Let's look forward to tomorrow's news. No problem at all. Mr. 3 nodded. This is the end of the brief phone call between the two sides. Crocodile and other squad leaders also led their respective teams to enter a state of preparation for the highest alert. The influence of the Tianlong people is too great, although Mr. 3 doesn't think that the naval headquarters will break out a war with the current crusaders for Charles Ross, not to mention that he also revealed the existence of Blackbeard. But the precautionary work before the news comes out must be as perfect as possible. At the same time, Mr. 3 also has something he needs to do, which is brand Hancock's wax figure in advance and store it in the Eternal Wax Museum. The Eternal Wax Museum can instantly replenish the target's status by storing the statues of the characters, but until now, he has not used this ability on other people. There are two reasons. First, the role of sit-ups is extremely important, almost equivalent to a second life, and it is impossible to reserve a place for others. Second, as a killer, the existence of the Eternal Wax Museum is one of his most crucial secrets. Unless he is a completely trustworthy person, he has no intention of revealing anything. Obviously, Hancock, who has been through a lot together, fits this perfectly. In order to successfully implement the plan of escape from the Golden Cicada, Mr. 3 felt that it was necessary to use the Eternal Wax Museum to simulate the most realistic Hancock wax figure even if it needed to consume a chance to save his life. After the awakening of the fruit ability, the wax figure he created, although it can reach the level of falsehood, but without Hancock's combat power, it is absolutely impossible to deceive the shrewd and cunning Blackbeard. Kale Bali, back hill. So, what do you need a concubine to do? Hancock crossed his chest with his hands and raised his hand to brush away the black strands of hair that fell on the side of his face. Having seen the Mr. 3 wax figure clone with her own eyes, after a brief shock, she naturally accepted the Eternal Wax Museum, a mysterious move after the awakening of the wax fruit's ability. Let go of your body and mind, and try not to give birth to a sense of resistance. While speaking, behind Mr. 3, a phantom of a wax museum made of pure candles slowly emerged, and gradually returned to the entity. Unlike his own use, the state of the Eternal Wax Museum's storage of other people's wax figures depends on the state of the person being copied. The heavier the vigilance of the copied person, the lower the state of the wax figure formed, and it is difficult to reach the perfect 80%. My concubine understands. Hancock nodded lightly, and there was a gentle expression in the depths of his beautiful eyes. Having spent many years in the New World, she is very aware of how filthy and dark the pirate world is, and there are only a handful of pirates who can make her willing to let go of all her defenses. The man in front of him who even dared to calculate with the Tianlong people is one of the few people. Seeing this, Mr. 3 stopped writing ink, and tried his best to mobilize the Eternal Wax Museum behind him. Eternal Wax Museum. It can store wax figures of designated characters, which can instantly replenish 80% of the peak state of the original body when used. The host can use it unconditionally. People outside the host depend on the degree of alertness. Cooling time of 7 days. Capacity 2. Cooling 1. Because on the Chambord Islands, he has used up a candle clone, so there is only one place left in the wax museum at this moment. On the empty candle holder, a gray-white beam of light constructed from tiny candle dust shone out and fell on Hancock. Hancock's delicate brows subconsciously furrowed slightly. She could feel very clearly that more and more candle particles were sticking to her body, lingering. The subconscious muscle rebound of her body was fleeting, and she took a deep breath, withdrawing all thoughts of defending against danger. In the blink of an eye, Hancock was completely covered in candle particles. A few seconds later, the candles covering Hancock's body melted away like an open flame, turning into white dots of light that floated up and down. The light spots slowly floated to the candlesticks of the wax museum, and recondensed into a candle statue with exactly the same appearance, demeanor, and figure as Hancock. Deep in Mr. Three's mind, a sound from the system came. The Eternal Wax Museum was successfully used, and the exquisite candle statue of Pirate Queen Boa Hancock was obtained. It can replenish 75% of the peak state. 75%. Mr. Three was taken aback involuntarily, and did not expect Hancock's wax figure data to be so high. You must know that even if he uses it himself, he can only restore 80% of his peak state. Failed. Hancock leaned over, puzzled. No, the process was very successful, but it was a bit physically exhausting. Mr. Three showed a rather tired state. After all, this kind of thing is not something that can be done easily. He made up a rationale that sounded reasonable. Can you really do such a thing? In addition to being shocked, Hancock's words were full of emotion. It's not just three-color domineering. I didn't expect you to even develop your fruit ability to such an incredible level. Ha ha ha. The situation forces you to either move forward or die, then just move forward. Mr. Three smiled and scratched his head. At this point, the preparatory work for the escape the shell strategy was successfully completed. As long as tomorrow's news comes out, they can immediately launch operations against Blackbeard. Mr. Three, my concubine has something special I want to show you. Looking at the phantom of the wax museum behind Mr. Three disappearing, Hancock suddenly smiled mysteriously, his eyes filled with the arrogance and confidence of a strong man. What? Just as Mr. Three was about to subconsciously ask a question, a strong crisis suddenly came head-on. Under the powerful domineering blessing of knowledge, he suddenly raised his black arms, which were covered with double protection of high-level cherry blossoms and dark gray candles, and crossed them in front of him. The slender white legs flashed past the eyes, and the next second, the red high-heeled shoes entwined with invisible power broke through the air and kicked Mr. Three's arm violently. It's sizzling. The crimson lightning that represents the domineering of the king exploded and raged in all directions. Gritting his teeth to resist the impact, Mr. Three's pupils shrank, and he saw that the high-heeled shoes of normal color, not covered with jet black armor, were exuding terrifying power. There is a gap of 10 centimeters between his arms, and there is no trace of any touch. Hancock, who kept raising her legs, was quite satisfied with Mr. Three's bloody expression. Her leg muscles fully bloomed, turning into a heavy impact and forcibly kicking Mr. Three away. After hitting a deep ravine in the woods of the back mountain, Mr. Three smashed into the mountain. In an instant, flocks of birds startled, flying sand and rocks. That was the tyrannical entanglement. I didn't expect that after coming out of the shadow of the past, you would master this top-level ability so quickly. Mr. Three walked out of the billowing dust unharmed, and the candle debris that kept falling off his body ensured the cleanliness of his clothes. It barely touched the threshold. Hancock retracted his long legs and sighed. There is still a considerable gap compared to those who have mastered this power for many years. Even so, that's strong enough. Mr. Three shook his numb arm. It is indeed a high-level form of domineering, and this thing of domineering is really fierce and yuppie. Recalling the domineering power that penetrated the armed color and candle arm guard just now, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. You know, now that he can play against the generals, his defense is already very top-notch, and it is difficult for ordinary powerhouses to even break defenses. And Hancock can just kick him on the spot with just one kick of the primary tyrant. This is the second time that Mr. Three has personally felt the terrifying power of tyrannical entanglement. The first time was in Kaido's domineering lecture hall. It's just that compared to Kaido's time, the entanglement used by Hancock in the real world is obviously more profound. Thinking of this, Mr. Three's eyes became very excited. In the near future, he will also get this powerful power. In this case, we will have greater protection for our next Jinchan escape plan. Although it is a matter of time, but in this special period of confrontation with Blackbeard, and possibly even with the Navy headquarters. Hancock, who has mastered the domineering entanglement of the Overlord, will definitely be a terrifying high-end combat power, with an extremely important deterrent effect. I don't know if it's the reason I just mastered it. The consumption of domineering by this attack method is huge. With just that kick just now, Hancock could clearly feel the passing of his domineering. Not much, but obviously, that's for sure. Mr. 3 nodded. Time passed quickly in the tense and chilling atmosphere of the cross. Under the light of the early morning, the delivery seagulls carrying the latest newspapers fly around the world. The president of the Crusaders, Buggy, the chief of staff, Mr. 3, and Hancock, attacked and kidnapped Charles Ross, the Draconian, in the Chambord Islands. It was like a blockbuster that completely detonated a new world that had been silent for several days. Whether it is the experienced pirate group, the various bosses in the underground world, the Revolutionary Army, or the countries allied to the world government, all forces were shocked beyond words by the sudden explosion news. Throughout history, no one dared to kidnap the Tianlong people so openly. That is the pinnacle of world power, the descendants of the Creator God. Everyone is guessing what the Crusaders intend to do. Very few people know about the existence of Doflamingo's identity as a dragon, and they have made overwhelming inferences and speculations about the conspiracy behind this inexplicable behavior. But one thing is certain, the Navy headquarters will definitely not be doing nothing like it is now. The situation changes, and the whole new world is shrouded in the shadow of the coming storm. At the same time, the territory of the Blackbeard pirates, Hive Island. Thief ha ha ha. There is a bounty for the Navy before, and then there is an attack on the Tianlong people. This guy Buggy is really crazy. Blackbeard, who was sitting in the main seat, held the newspaper in his hand, and his loud, piercing laughter echoed in the dimly lit space. Although I don't know the purpose of their doing this, it is clear, brothers, that our chance has come. Blackbeard's eyes narrowed, and he did not hide the ferocity and murderous intent deep in his eyes. Whether it is to snatch the dark fruit and the shocking fruit, or defeat the legendary One Piece G, occupying this pirate paradise island. It is because he grasps the perfect timing every time that he can realize all these difficult things. And now, with the urine nature of the world government, the 5 old stars will definitely not let the Tianlong people be treated like this. Once they get their hands on the Crusaders, that's the perfect time for him to take Hancock. Just when Blackbeard was surging, Devil Sheriff Lafitte walked in slowly with a white phone bug in his hand. Captain, the encrypted phone of the cross. Oh? So soon? I thought I would have to wait a while longer. Blackbeard laughed, as if he had expected this call. He took the phone bug from Lafitte. Hello, I'm Titch. A 3 hairstyle appeared on the phone bug's head, and Mr. 3's voice came out. Blackbeard, regarding the exchange of Hancock that you mentioned a few days ago, I think we can talk about it. Oh? So what do you want to talk about, Chief of Staff of the Cross? Blackbeard's fierce eyes were full of playfulness. Our President Buggy has agreed. According to the conditions you gave before, Hancock will be exchanged with you for Moria and some of the resources of the underground world. Mr. 3 said in a deep voice. A firm tone with just the right amount of tangle. Thief ha ha ha. Hearing this, Blackbeard couldn't hold back his laughter, and sarcastically said, Didn't you guys have a very tough attitude before, and you were unwilling to hand over Hancock even if there was a war? Why did you suddenly change your mind now? Mr. 3 explained quite frankly, there is no eternal friend in the world of pirates. Compared with Hancock, we think Moria plays a bigger role, that's all. I am afraid that you are afraid of being surrounded and suppressed by the Navy, and you were eager to get Moria with an infinite zombie army? Blackbeard quickly saw through the minds of Mr. 3 and Buggy, but did not refute. Interests come first. This is indeed the eternal truth of the pirate world. If Mr. 3's rhetoric is too flashy, he will be wary. It's a natural reason. Since you are so sincere, I can pretend that the previous offense didn't happen, but... Blackbeard's words changed. I'm sorry. I suddenly changed my mind about the interests of the underground world. In the past few days, your Doflamingo has taken a lot from me. I need you to return all the parts that you took away. Now the situation has been completely reversed, and he has this bargaining capital. At the same time, he was suspicious by nature, and he also wanted to use this to judge the true intentions of the Crusaders. After all, until now, he still doesn't know what purpose is hidden behind the abduction of the Tianlong people by the Crusaders at all costs. Hearing this, the phone bug imitated Mr. 3's gloomy face and sent a message. What do you mean? You're a smart Mr. 3. I've made it clear what I mean. If you want Moria, you have to exchange Hancock and underground world resources, Blackbeard snapped. After pondering for a few seconds, Mr. Three's voice was filled with imperceptible anger. What a joke. Hancock is a partner who has lived and died with us. Blackbeard just wanted to sneer at this hypocritical remark, but he heard Mr. Three on the other side of the phone worm continue to say, I have to add money, how can there be a reason to post it backwards? Hearing this, a smile suddenly appeared on Blackbeard's cautious face. As rumored, he is a sinister, cunning and mercenary villain. Then there's nothing to talk about. Blackbeard decisively refused. Let's talk about it after you guys think about it. After all, without waiting for Mr. Three to speak, he unilaterally hung up the phone. Damn it. Vaguely, he heard Mr. Three's scolding and the sound of hammering the table on the other end of the phone, and the smile on the corner of his mouth became even stronger. Captain, isn't our goal Hancock? Now that they have voluntarily made concessions, why do they have to hang up? The sturdy Giza's Badgers asked with a puzzled face. In his dull eyes, being able to exchange Moria for Hancock without directly conflicting with the Crusaders is the top priority. Where is there any reason to keep the other party out? After all, the overall combat power of the Crusades is no weaker than them. Don't worry, they won't give up so easily. Blackbeard leaned back in the chair confidently, not panicking at all. Other members of the Black group who knew the reason, also followed with unexplained smiles. After thinking about the reason carefully, Badgers finally reacted. He smiled and said, so it is, as expected of you, Captain. About half an hour later, the phone bug beside Blackbeard rang again and turned into a red nose. This time it's not Mr. Three, it's Buggy. Tick, we cannot take the interests of the underground world, but we can never give it to you in reverse. Mariah replaces Hancock. This is the biggest concession I can make. Compared with Mr. Three, Buggy's attitude is much tougher, and he is unwilling to give up any superfluous benefits. The more they showed this kind of villain appearance, the more relaxed the guard in Blackbeard's heart. Thief, ha ha ha. Forget about Buggy, no matter what, we are old friends. After a brief thought, Blackbeard looked serious and agreed to the deal. Let's talk about it, the time and place. Also, you must put Shanghai stone handcuffs on Hancock. Buggy breathed a sigh of relief and said slowly, relax, this is for sure. The location is set on the island between our two forces, and the time is 4 o'clock in the afternoon. How about it? The time is no problem, the island has to be decided by me. Blackbeard kept his mind. Okay. Buggy said he had no objection. After negotiation between the two parties, the location of the transaction was finally set in the waters of the New World, a neutral island called Giant Pot Island. Of course, as the 4 emperors of the New World, every action they make will attract the close attention of the naval headquarters. Therefore, before taking action, whether it is the Blackbeard pirates or the Crusaders, they must first eradicate the Navy's surveillance ships. This is not difficult for them. It's just that under Mr. Three's instruction, the Crusaders did not clean up all the naval surveillance ships, but deliberately left out one. Since this transaction is going to throw the cauldron of attacking and kidnapping the Tianlong people to Blackbeard, witnesses are definitely needed. He has already dug the pits in the Chambord archipelago for Green Bull. As long as the world government wants to maintain the dignity of the Tianlong people, it will definitely take action. At the same time, in order to avoid the leakage of the advancing route and being intercepted by the Navy halfway, the battleships of the Crusaders will continue to change their destinations to go to the Giant Pot Island. The flag of the Clown Buggy Pirates hangs high, fluttering wantonly in the fierce sea breeze. Unlike the previous several voyages, this time they no longer hide their identities, but will traverse the New World with a high profile as the new 4 emperors cross union. Soon, the actions of the Crusaders and the Blackbeard pirates were transmitted back to the Navy headquarters through the surveillance ship. The senior naval generals who knew in advance of the operation to recapture the Tianlong people couldn't help but swallow their saliva at the thought of a major conflict that is very likely to occur in the next few hours, and even their breathing became rapid. Although the main battlefield this time is far away from an island in the New World, the naval headquarters at this moment has been enveloped in a strong and extreme depression. In this chilling atmosphere, the 3 naval warships quietly left the port, and in the report of the only remaining surveillance ships, they pursued the pirate ship of the Crusaders. On the warship headed by them, 3 tall figures wearing naval justice cloaks stood proudly. They just looked into the distance calmly, and the coercion they exuded was extremely terrifying. Pale yellow sunglasses, brown cane and long knife, black sunglasses. These 3 are the 3 generals of the Navy headquarters. Kizaru Perusalino, Fujitora Smile, Green Cow Aramaki. Under the extremely tense attention of many forces, the battleship of the Crusaders pushed aside the waves, and under the guidance of the Eternal Pointer, sailed to the destination of this trip, Juguo Island. After a long curve driving, they were only a few nautical miles away from Juguo Island. Through the monocular, you can vaguely see part of the outline of a giant island. On the deck of the battleship, several big pirates with a bounty of more than 100 million clenched their swords tightly, staring at the figure standing in front of them with chilling eyes. Mr. 3, Hawkeye, Weevil, Doflamingo, and Ayasha, who stood silent in the side corner. This is the lineup that the Cross-Trade Union dispatched to trade with Blackbeard this time. Needless to say, Hawkeye and Weevil, in addition to being strong enough to fight, as non-devil fruit power users, they have an absolute advantage in fighting Blackbeard and are not easy to be restrained. In contrast, although Doflamingo is not very strong, but after awakening, the ability of Line and Line Fruit can play a good auxiliary role in this high-end game, including bandaging treatment, creating air footholds, etc. Letting the newly joined Doflamingo participate in this level of transaction can give him enough sense of presence and participation, and then accept the organization of the Cross-Trade Union from the bottom of his heart. The more important reason is that Mr. 3 wants him to see the current overall strength of the Cross-Union with his own eyes. This is the most effective way to completely conquer the rebellious Doflamingo. As for Ayasha, aside from its own strength, it is naturally the important role of the malicious fruit. Why not bring Buggy? In a conflict of this level, this guy either ran away with oil on his feet, or was shocked to death by the aftermath of the battle. It was really unnecessary, and it was better to stay at Kale Bali Island. Coupled with Hancock, who has mastered the tyranny, and Crocodile, who is calm and clear-headed, on their side, there is no need to worry too much about being stolen by some sinister dog thief, and they can completely let go of their hands and feet. To be able to make a wax figure of this level, Mr. 3, you once again amaze me. The eagle eye with the crossed black knife turned, glanced at the wax figure Hancock standing in the corner of the deck, and couldn't help but let out a sigh. As a nominal ally, he had no intention of intervening in the conflict between the Crusaders and Blackbeard. However, after seeing this wax figure with Hancock's close combat power, he temporarily changed his mind. He wanted to see with his own eyes how much the Mr. 3 in front of him could do in this conflict. Of course, he will only take action when necessary, and it is even more impossible to work for the Crusades. If conditions permit, Hawkeye, I can also make your wax figure. Mr. 3 joked with a smile. He thought about using this topic to test Hawkeye's level of trust in him, and then formulate a future recruitment plan. That's right, after his strength increased exponentially, he started to recruit Hawkeye again. Really? But unfortunately, I'm not interested in such boring things. Hawkeye refused decisively without any hesitation. Like this kind of ability that can even copy the body strength and combat skills, there must be a corresponding price. As the world's largest swordsman, he didn't want his secrets to be exposed in front of others. Aha, that's really a pity. Mr. 3 smiled awkwardly and scratched his head. He refused without asking for any conditions. Sure enough, these Shisabukai are all human beings, so there is no one stupid. He sighed in his heart. Suddenly, a tall, strong shadow was covered. Weevil with a naive face brought his big head closer and asked curiously, "Well, third brother, me, can you make my candle statue? It looks so cool." Under Ayasha's subtle malicious erasure and transfer, his maliciousness towards the Cross Union is actually very low. Mr. 3. Well, except for this Tai Han. Shut up, big man, we're here. Doflamingo in a feather coat walked over with arrogant steps, raised his hand and pointed to the island that appeared in front of him. Several people looked up, and their expressions gradually became solemn. I saw a huge island upside down on the sea like a cauldron. The island is covered with hills and overgrown with trees. Occasionally, huge beasts can be seen shuttling among them. It's a good battlefield for a three-way conflict, but this is not the trading location that Mr. 3 and Blackbeard agreed to. They are all shrewd and cunning. Compared with the islands where the other side is ambushed anytime and anywhere, it is obvious that the spacious and open sea is more secure. The battleship of the Crusaders slowly sailed into the waters around Juguo Island. In front of them, a pirate ship transformed from a giant bamboo raft had been waiting for a long time. The pirate flag printed with 3 skull heads fluttered in the sea breeze, and the bright red, black barrow on the huge black sail was extremely conspicuous, with a heavy sense of oppression. This pirate ship is the main ship of the Blackbeard pirates, the Sword of Gibbok. Thief, ha ha ha, it's finally here. Little ones, get ready to meet the Crusaders. The black beard on the deck let out a thief laugh, and his ferocious eyes were full of madness and tyranny. Beside Blackbeard, several cadres slowly stood up, followed by a sinister smile of different shades on the corners of their mouths. Captain of Ship 1, Fighting Champion Giza's Badgers. Captain of Ship Number 3, Yinyu Van Oka. Captain of Ship Number 9, Reaper Poison Q and Sick Horse Strong. Captain of Ship Number 8, Basque Chote of the Great Barrel. Regarding this transaction with the Crusaders, Blackbeard was very cautious, not only dispatched himself, but also brought nearly half of the core members of the Black Group. As the two sides looked at each other, the distance between the Crusaders and the Blackbeard pirates gradually narrowed until they were in full contact. Mr. 3, I've wanted to meet you since a long time ago. Blackbeard's gaze swept across the strong men dispatched by the Crusaders. After a pause on Hawkeye, it finally landed on Mr. 3, who was headed by him. It's my honor to be able to make the four emperors Blackbeard care so much. Mr. 3 looked directly into Blackbeard's eyes without any fear. Different from what he felt off the screen and on the phone, the Blackbeard he saw with his own eyes had a fierce look and a tyrannical aura. The sense of oppression emanating from the tall body is even more terrifying than the green cow. What about that coward Buggy? Didn't he heard that he was going to trade with me, so he was so scared that he hid in Turtle Island and shivered and didn't dare to come out. I didn't see Buggy's Blackbeard sneering. Just like the shock in Mr. 3's heart, he also felt a powerful and domineering force beyond expectations from Mr. 3. It's hard to imagine that a man with such domineering power was still unknown a few months ago. President Buggy has more important things to deal with. It is enough for me to do such a small matter as trading with you. Mr. 3's face was calm, but his tone was unusually arrogant. Hearing this, Budgeston, who was standing beside Blackbeard, was furious and shouted, "It's just a guy who has become famous recently, Mr. 3, what are you?" Jung. At the moment when the voice fell, the black mist raged, and Ayasha, who was in the center of maliciousness, took the lead in pushing the scabbard, and her eyes were full of killing intent. She will not allow anyone to speak rudely to the third brother, not to mention that the other party is a member of the hostile pirate group. Click. As for Blackbeard, the sniper Van Oka responded extremely quickly. He loaded his gun and pointed his icy muzzle at Mr. 3. Gollum. Almost at the same time, the big barrel Basque Chote put down the jug in his hand. Badgers raised his elbows that had accumulated good energy, and Poison Q and Sick Horse Zhuangzwang also burst into gloomy hostility. As a countermeasure, on the Cross Guild side, Hawkeye clasped his chest in both hands, expressionless. Weevil held up his black sword, and Doflamingo twisted his fingers with a sinister smile, and manipulated countless invisible threads. The two sides were instantly drawn to each other, and a dull and oppressive atmosphere enveloped the entire sea area. Ayasha, it's just trash talk, don't care. Mr. 3 waved his arms, and a light laughter without caring broke the tense atmosphere. Ayasha and others restrained their breath and regained their calm. Seeing this, the cadres of the Blackbeard pirates on the opposite side followed with their tense fighting stances. Blackbeard, the unnecessary temptation will be avoided, let's trade directly, Mr. 3 said to Blackbeard. Blackbeard raised his hand and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead due to excessive tension with an inexplicable smile on the corner of his mouth. No problem. After all, he clapped his hands. The two younger brothers immediately pressed Moria and came over. Bastard Blackbeard, when I am free, you will definitely be the first to kill me. Despite being bound by chains, Mariah, who had a bruised nose and a swollen face, was still struggling violently and swearing endlessly. In a sense, this thing is really quite spiritual. After seeing Mariah, Mr. 3 looked back to the cabin behind him. The younger brothers with a bounty of more than 100 million nodded knowingly, and also led Hancock to the bow. Hancock was wearing a black-purple coat that covered his entire body. He had no scratches on his face. He only had Halushi handcuffs hanging on his arms. At this time, she didn't swear like Moria, but looking at Mr. 3, her eyes were full of endless resentment. At the first sight of Hancock, who is as beautiful as a fairy, Blackbeard felt that his breathing became short. As long as it is a man, it is impossible to be 90% immune to the beauty of the pirate empress, even he is no exception. As agreed in the phone bug, Mr. 3, I need to check the authenticity of this Hancock first. Blackbeard quickly suppressed the restlessness in his heart. Please. Mr. 3 said naturally. Then I'm welcome. Blackbeard's eyes turned hard, and he stretched out his arms towards Hancock, who was not far away, and the black mist in the vortex was continuously coming out of the 5 fingers that were spread out. Dark water. Seeing this familiar move, Hawkeye's sharp eyes suddenly shrank. In the top battle 2 years ago, he had seen Blackbeard make a similar move against Whitebeard. Through the power of the dark fruit, Blackbeard can draw other devil fruit powers to his side and nullify their powers. But the Hancock wax figure at this time is not the deity. Even if it has a combat power similar to that of Hancock, it does not have the ability of the original devil fruit other than the wax fruit. This is what Mr. 3 has mentioned before. Like his reaction, the younger brother who knew about this action, although he pretended to be calm on the surface, was already filled with panic. They never imagined that Blackbeard would be so cautious that he would use the fruit power as soon as he came up. Brother Doflamingo and Ayasha are nervous and ready to fight. However, to everyone's surprise, in the suction of Blackbeard's palm, Hancock, who was bound by Halushi, struggled violently for a while, and then flew towards Blackbeard uncontrollably. Blackbeard precisely pinched Hancock's fair neck, raised his arm high, and without any intention of keeping his hand, he slammed her down on the deck. Boom. The powerful force directly smashed through the deck, and Hancock was firmly embedded in the middle of the plank, blood spilling from the corner of his mouth. Blackbeard Tiki. Hancock's beautiful eyes were filled with endless anger and killing intent. Blackbeard stared at Hancock closely, and after a few seconds of silence, he raised his head and laughed loudly. Thief, ha ha ha. It is indeed the real thing. As soon as these words came out, the cadres of the Blackbeard pirates breathed a sigh of relief and slowly released the fighting state. On the battleship of the Crusaders, all the younger brothers raised their eyes in surprise, and looked at Mr. 3 in front of him with a dejected expression. Could it be that the one who just traded was the real boy Hancock? Is it the counterfeit wax figure that is staying on Kale Bali at this time? In order to achieve his goal, Mr. 3 betrayed his partner? Even Hawkeye and Doflamingo couldn't help but frown slightly, and some didn't understand what Mr. 3 wanted to do. There was only Ayasha in black in the audience, her eyes firmly standing behind Mr. 3. Even if she doesn't know the specific reason, she will unconditionally choose to trust the third brother, and she is definitely not the kind of person who betrays her partner. Since there is no problem, let's quickly complete the transaction. Mr. 3 sighed, turned his head subconsciously, and couldn't bear to see his former companion being so ravaged. He is not worried that Blackbeard will turn his face and leave after getting Hancock. After all, a strong combat power is the best guarantee to ensure a fair trade. Blackbeard's scrutiny glances past Mr. 3 and looked at the younger Crusaders behind him. After feeling their incomparably real loss, he grinned and let go of the guard and suspicion in the center. The purpose is achieved, give them the useless Moria, and then press Hancock into the cabin and close it. The black group boy nodded, directly violently lifted Moria, and threw it at the battleship of the Crusaders. Mariah screamed and drew a graceful parabola in midair, slamming head down on the sturdy deck. No one was willing to pick him up. You bastards. Is that how you welcome the newly joined powerhouses? Moria scolded angrily. Unfortunately, no one paid him any attention. After confirming that Hancock was locked into the cabin by his younger brother, and there was no possibility of escape, Blackbeard showed a satisfied smile. To be honest, I didn't expect this deal to go so smoothly. Mr. 3, you are a very good man, and that guy is too talented to follow Buggy. How about you? Do you want to come to my boat? Knowing the result, he still sent out the invitation very enthusiastically. Mr. 3 was about to say a few words, but a red light flashed in his eyes. Under the domineering blessing of seeing and hearing, he captured a powerful and familiar aura. Hee, it's really time. Is this also the effect of the S-level lucky halo of the Buggy camp? What a terrible lineup. Just standing here, my body can't help but tremble. With a lazy voice in wretchedness, it slowly floated out from the sky above the Crusaders' Union fleet. Everyone at the scene, especially the Blackbeard pirates, raised their heads suddenly. After seeing the tall figure standing tall and straight on the top of the mast, they couldn't help but show horror. Admiral of the Navy Headquarters, Kizaru Borsellino, why is he here? When the atmosphere fell into silence, Mr. 3's cussing voice sounded very abruptly. Fuck. You fucking Blackbeard, you actually violated the agreement and secretly lured the Navy over. Not only did Mr. 3's voice confuse the Blackbeard pirates, but even the Crusaders and others who knew the inside story were shocked and dumbfounded. They are all insidious and cunning people who have been in the pirate world for many years, but compared with the shameless Mr. 3, they are really inferior. I killed all the surveillance ships long before departure. After reacting, Blackbeard's face became extremely gloomy. Mr. 3, how dare you plan against Lao Su? Not to be outdone, Mr. 3 met his vicious eyes and scolded. Who knows if you missed anything? To be on the safe side, our voyage is still on a curve. Do you have any asterisk? Hearing such shameless remarks, the younger brothers of the Cross Union turned their heads and couldn't bear to look directly, and could only complain wildly in their hearts. That, third brother, we are obviously afraid of being attacked and ambushed by the Navy, so we walked the curve. Blackbeard was about to refute, when a lazy voice came from above. Yo, sorry to interrupt your quarrel. If you can you please hand over the heavenly dragon St. Charles Rose first? Kizaru put his hands in his pockets, his slightly obscene eyes swept over the two sides from top to bottom, and sighed softly. It's getting late. This old man wants to get off work as soon as possible. Kazuna, are you mistaken? Blackbeard pointed to the battleship of the Cross Guild and shouted. What we want on this trip is just the pirate queen Boyahan Cook. Those who attacked and kidnapped the Tianlong people, but they crossed the Union. What does it have to do with Laozi? If the Admiral is really here for the Tianlong people, then maybe he can point the finger at the Cross Trade Union, let them fight a battle, and reap the benefits of the fishermen. Even so, Blackbeard's brows furrowed involuntarily. A strong sixth sense told him that things would never be so simple and smooth. Trading the Pirate Empress? The information I received is not like this. Even facing the two four emperors at the same time, Kizaru's voice was still flat, and he didn't see the slightest nervousness from that wretched face. Hearing this, Mr. 3 stepped forward and stood on the bow. Because of his extreme anger, he kept exuding an uncontrolled, powerful aura. Good, you Blackbeard Tiki who crossed the river and demolished the bridge. Obviously agreed, we will help you kidnap the Tianlong people, you hand over Moonlight Moria to us, and now the transaction is completed. What kind of Hancock are you making out of thin air? Before waiting for the inexplicable Blackbeard to speak, behind Mr. 3, Ayasha took the lead and took a sigh of relief. I didn't expect the legendary Four Emperors Blackbeard to be such a shameless bastard. Hearing that, the pirate brothers who were still complaining about the shameless third brother 1 second ago, reacted the next second and joined the scolding battle. I just caught the Tianlong people and locked them in the cabin, and in a blink of an eye, they became rascals. Is this the Four Emperors Blackbeard? Even a dog won't bite back after eating, right? Hetui. Blackbeard, no wonder your face looks so thick. The elegant greetings came one after another, and the younger brothers of the Cross Union were full of fire, standing at the bow of the boat. It's really hard to imagine. What the hell, it's the Four Emperors standing at the apex of the New World. It's just a group of nameless people, and they're really brave. The dignified Four Emperors were so ridiculed by a group of younger brothers, even Blackbeard couldn't help but get angry, clench his fists and smashed into the void. Hum. The shaking fruit's ability exploded, causing the surrounding sea to be turbulent. The arrogant younger brothers were stunned in an instant, and quickly hid behind the strong men such as Mr. 3 and Hawkeye, only sticking out their heads and spraying outside. Kizaru, who was standing at the top of the mast, watched the abnormal behavior of the two sides. He knew very well that these two pirate groups were all shrewd and treacherous people. If they were easily deceived by the false appearance of their quarrel, the end would definitely not be extremely miserable. To be cautious, Kizaru directly ignored the words of the Cross Union and the Blackbeard pirates, and silently took out a small note from the inside of his clothes. This is the time of departure, the life card of St. Charles of the Dragons handed over to him. He wants to verify the whereabouts of St. Charles Rose himself. As Kizaru spread out his hands, he saw the fingernail-sized life card slowly floating, swaying, and pointed to the cabin of the black-bearded pirate ship ahead. As the old man expected, you are digging a hole for the old man. What a terrible conspiracy. Kizaru, who got the answer in his heart, stood up a little bit, and the laziness on his face was replaced by a rare solemnity. How can that be? Seeing the black beard pointed to by the life card, he froze in place. When he traded just now, he had indeed tested it on the spot, and it was not only a devil fruit person, but also a strong and powerful physique. That must be Hancock, and many more. Could it be that? In order to bury him titch here, the Navy has reached some kind of agreement with the Crusaders? Blackbeard's eyes kept jumping on Mr. 3 and Kizaru. After thinking of this possibility, his expression turned gloomy to the extreme. Standing in the distance, Mr. 3 captured Blackbeard's restless emotions, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help showing a scheming smile. Bringing the Navy and Blackbeard here at the same time, the biggest risk he needs to take is that these two forces temporarily unite to target their cross union. At that time, even with Hawkeye's help, their situation will become extremely bad. But that's very unlikely. First of all, the Navy and Blackbeard have an irreversible deep hatred, and because of Blackbeard's suspicious personality, he will definitely worry about whether the Navy and the Cross Union want to kill them all under the guise of Tianlong people. After all, Doflamingo has forged the illusion of abolishing the identity of Shichibukai by modifying the newspaper before. As for the Navy, it was impossible to easily believe the scheming Blackbeard's nonsense. What's more, at this time, they have already learned that the Tianlong people are on Blackbeard's pirate ship. The Blackbeard pirates thought that the Cross Guild had colluded with the Navy, and the Navy believed that the Cross Guild and the Blackbeard pirates had an alliance cooperation relationship. The two sides were suspicious of each other and had concerns. The resulting situation is that none of them will trust anyone. This is the art and courage of Mr. Three's former villains who first complained and scolded. It is also his unique view of the overall situation as a traverser who thoroughly analyzes the forces and characters of the original work. Just as the three parties were deadlocked, in the special cell of the Blackbeard pirate ship, the younger brother suddenly stumbled out, his face full of horror. Not good. Admiral Blackbeard, not good. The Pirate Empress has melted, and there is still one person inside. As soon as these words came out, all the members of the Black group were shocked. What did you say? Blackbeard grabbed the younger brother's head, his eyes exuding a murderous light. Call out. Almost at the same time, a dazzling light flashed from the sky, condensing in front of Blackbeard into the emaciated figure of Kizaru. I'm careless, Blackbeard titch. Kizaru's voice was lazy, but his attack speed was quite fast. When Blackbeard's domineering arrogance caught the dangerous aura, his right leg turned into a laser beam appeared in front of him. Unpredictable, Blackbeard could only barely raise his arm covered in jet black armed color to resist. Boom. Speed is power, and the incomparably heavy force exploded on Blackbeard's stout arm, causing him to back up again and again. The light on Kizaru's legs was shining brightly, and he was about to kick the Blackbeard flying, but unexpectedly, a huge force that trembled in space came from the touch point, shaking his entire leg to twist and deform. Dark water. Knowing that the battle was inevitable, Blackbeard was quite decisive. While using the shaking fruit ability to counterattack, he raised the other palm filled with darkness and grabbed the yellow monkey who was in front of him. It's bad now. Kizaru widened his eyes, revealing a look of fear. Of course, this was fake. Gravity Hell Brigade. A steady and heavy voice came from behind him, and a purple light circle immediately appeared at the feet of Blackbeard and the other cadres. The huge explosion of gravity far beyond common sense instantly suppressed the Blackbeard who shot towards Kiabu, making him unable to move. The hard deck collapsed downward, and the entire pirate ship was in turmoil under this heavy pressure. Blackbeard Tiki, I've admired his name for a long time. Fujitora, holding a cane and a sword, said slowly. Admiral of the Navy headquarters, Fujitora smiled. Looking at the blind man who suddenly appeared behind Kizaru, Blackbeard's pupils shrank under the heavy pressure, and a few drops of cold sweat oozed out of his forehead. Behind him, the cadre of the Black Regiment, who was also restricted by gravity, also had surprise written on his face. The appearance of the two generals made them, with their sharp nerves, realize that something was wrong. The atmosphere in the audience suddenly became extremely depressing, like a powerful explosive barrel that would explode at any time. And the job of completely detonating this explosive barrel is naturally done by Mr. 3. The Black Regiment thought the Navy teamed up with the Cross Union, and the Navy thought the Black Regiment and the Cross Union teamed up. Then, as the only force in the audience who knows the situation, their role is naturally a shitstick. The more chaotic the situation, the less chance for the Black Regiment and the Navy to calm down and talk, and the more beneficial it is for them. Only the pot that attacked the Tianlong people can be better and more firmly buckled on Blackbeard. You chose to betray in the transaction among the four emperors, then you must pay the price for what you did, Mr. 3 scolded angrily, with awe-inspiring righteousness. Standing behind him at the bow, the candles surging and condensed, forming 3 giant candle dragons, staring fiercely at the Blackbeard pirates and 2 admirals not far away. Die Blackbeard! Candle Dragon Blast! Whoosh whoosh! The 3 candle dragons rushed towards the stalemate of the Blackbeard pirates and the admiral in an arrogant and domineering manner. At the moment of arrival, the dragon's head burst into a scorching fire. Boom! A deafening explosion resounded through this sea area, and under the decoration of scattered candles, mushroom-shaped black smoke enveloped the entire Blackbeard pirate ship. Oh! You bastard Blackbeard, have you seen it? This is the power of our Cross Union. Behind Mr. 3, the pirate boys cheered loudly, and the momentum was quite surging. Although I don't know how Mr. 3 did it, from the previous reports of the younger brothers of the Blackbeard pirates, they already knew that everything was going according to plan. Their chief of staff did not do such insidious things as betraying their partners. Damn guy. Even Lao Su has calculated. Compared with the excitement of the younger brothers, Doflamingo looked gloomy and unhappy. Obviously, Mr. 3 knew that Blackbeard had the means to target those with devil fruit abilities, and made adequate preparations for it. In order to completely hide from Blackbeard, all of them who do not know why are in this preparation. Although this is to ensure that the so-called escape from the shell strategy is foolproof, but he has always been the only one who has calculated others. How can there be any reason to be calculated by others? Hawkeye, who was standing beside him, was still expressionless, and he didn't know what he was thinking at this moment. Be careful, another powerful guy is coming. Suddenly, Hawkeye's sharp eyes turned slightly and glanced at the other side of the sea. As the world's greatest swordsman, his arrogance naturally surpassed everyone present. The little pirates looked up at the sea level and were immediately taken aback. I saw that on the sea that should have been empty, a dark green continent was rapidly approaching here. It was the wildly growing thick seagrass and aquatic vines. Mr. 3, I didn't expect to meet again so soon. The account of the Chambord Islands, we have to come and do a good calculation. Behind the green continent, the cloak of justice fluttered freely, and a tall figure wearing sunglasses stood on it. It is the Admiral of the Navy Headquarters, the Green Bull Wild Shepherd. Again, another general? The pirate boys of the Crusades were stunned, their muscles tensed to the extreme. Even though Mr. 3 had given them a precautionary shot before they set off, no matter how much prevention they took, as long as they were pirates, the moment they saw the three generals appearing at the same time, their heads would inevitably have a short circuit. Those who took part in this operation were all strong men with a bounty of more than a million. If it were an ordinary pirate, facing the terrible pressure of the three generals, they would definitely be paralyzed on the ground and unable to move. The little brothers panicked, and the seaweed vines had spread to the battleship of the Cross Union, turning into dark green plants and bulls rushing in. 5-color thread, spider web wall. Doflamingo, who was alerted by the eagle eye and had been prepared, jumped up, spread his arms, and swung a giant spider web made of tough silk threads. Bang bang bang. Green Bull's first wave of vegetation attacks were blocked by 5-color spider webs. Doflamingo still has such strength? Mr. 3 was quite surprised. In his intuitive cognition, Doflamingo, who was barely able to take over even the 4th gear Luffy's boxing, should not be too strong in combat. At least it wouldn't block the Admiral's move so easily, even though it was a greeting attack. But it makes sense to think about it a little bit. After all, in the face of the freezing pheasant, Doflamingo can break free with his own strength. More or less, I still suffer from the loss of the protagonist's halo and version. Mr. 3 couldn't help but tease in his heart, and then he looked up at the back of the green continent, his eyes gradually becoming solemn. I thought there were only 3 generals at most. I didn't expect that the lineup dispatched by the Navy would be so luxurious this time. There, in the thin sea fog, 3 huge naval warships were advancing in the Green Sea, and on the bow of each warship stood a Vice Admiral of the Navy Headquarters. And white hair and dark skin, black wings with flaming black, huge physique, and the secret weapon of the Navy with the youthful appearance of Shichibukai, Seraph.